All right, we'll do a roll call, please.
Douglas Beatty.
Here.
Kathy Buckley. Michael Hagedorn.
Here.
Ed Marin.
Here.
Christopher Michaud. Krista Palmer.
Here.
Nicole Pupor.
Here.
Mark Sand. Pauline Stone.
Here.
Grant Decker.
All right. Okay, last agenda. Resolve that superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education to approve the agenda. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Doug. Palmer. Any questions, discussions on the agenda? All in favor? Pass. All right. We have a moment for public comment, and I think we have some new cheat sheet on requirements and kind of advice on how to do public comment if anyone's interested. As we don't have anybody coming to public comment, we'll continue with presentations. So the first one is, presenters are Jack Kelly and Bobby Jariwala. Did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
From Trustworthy LLC.
Well, good evening. My name's Jack Kelly. I'm a development consultant. If you want to know what that is, I help companies create jobs and improve the quality of life for people. I've been fortunate to fall into that profession. And I seem like I know the Beekmantown Central School District. My daughter went to St. Lawrence and then was at BU, roommate, when she was over in BU, was Colleen Bradley, who some of you may know was valedictorian here at the school in 2011. And she just couldn't say anything but good words about what you've got and what we've seen. I'm very impressed. So with me tonight is Bobby Jariwala, who owns the Days Inn over here in over in Plattsburgh. He also owns 11 other hotels from Glens Falls. If you're coming up the Northway and see that new Home 2 that's there at exit 19, the hotel over in Lake Placid. So he and his partners are investing a lot of capital. They have a lot of faith in this upstate New York area. And also joining us as part of our team is Renee McFarland, who's with the Beekmantown Industrial Development Agency. With that, I'll turn the program over to Bobby, and thank you very much for allowing us tonight. And I'll tell you, if you haven't had a chance to get out there, the leaves are just about at peak. You have a beautiful lineup.
Good evening. As Jack mentioned, my name is Bobby Jariwala from Oakfield Hospitality, and I want to start off by thanking the board for allowing us to present today. My family purchased the Days Inn in Plattsburgh almost 10 years ago. It's actually going to be our 10-year anniversary at the end of this month. And I was in the Boston area working for corporate Marriott for quite some time. And when I decided to join the family business, my first venture was acquiring this hotel in Plattsburgh. And it's kind of interesting that 10 years later, we're making a huge capital investment to improve the facility and try to elevate our hotel to the next level. What we're looking to do at this property is basically add on a new addition. It's an L-shaped building with the longer part of the L faces north. And we're creating a new lobby with higher ceilings because right now the facility has very low ceilings. The facility was built in the early 1980s. And there'll be a new vestibule coming off of the new lobby addition as well as a carport. And we're converting a Days Inn into a Holiday Inn Express. The needs of consumers have really evolved over the last 10, 15 years. There's a lot of new technology in guest rooms. Guest expectations are much higher than they used to be. The amenities that people require with internet and breakfast continues to evolve. And with this evolution, we really need to be able to offer a stronger product than what the Days Inn used to offer. So Jack mentioned, we're with a company called Oakfield Hospitality. Oakfield currently has several portfolio of hotels in the Northeast, many of them in upstate New York. And we really look at upstate New York as an area that's continuing to have more and more hospitality demand through corporate and leisure demand. Wanted to show this stuff. I apologize, it's a little blurry. This is from 10 years ago, and I had to pull this from an old Facebook post, believe it or not. This shows what the facility looked like when we acquired it. And it was a very tired-looking facility. A lot of people thought it was an office building, and one of the first things we did was we created an entire new facade by replacing all the windows and the ephes and the gables, and really doing an extensive facelift. And the town and the community was great to work with, because people look at this as the first building that you see when you take exit 37, which is the highest traffic count by far to the area. So we really love working with the town, and we're really looking to take this hotel to the next level. As I mentioned, we have an L-shaped building, so we're building about a 1,600 square foot lobby addition with a carport. Right now, the property doesn't have a carport. Carport is very beneficial during times of rain, winter conditions, and it's just become the norm. I look at a carport as really one of those amenities that differentiates a motel from a hotel, and adding a carport really adds that the luxury amenity that guests love. Here are just some renderings of what the public areas will look like. We currently have an interior designer that's still tweaking the final concept and the design. But as you can see, we're really looking for a contemporary, modern feel, something that you would feel when you walk into a brand new hotel. Yes, this hotel is going to be existing, and a lot of the guest rooms are existing, but this all here is brand new space. Here's some elevations, again, just showing, there isn't too much change to the exterior other than the new color scheme. The renovation we did 10 years ago is still making the exterior, it's holding up well. So most of the change is on the interior. We're completely gutting the guest rooms, all new bathrooms, shower stalls with new tub surrounds, all new, whole new FF&E package in the guest rooms, from carpet to bedding to lighting, TVs, all that stuff, new wireless internet system, a whole new breakfast area. So really, this is going to feel like a brand new hotel when you walk through it.
So with that, you probably want to know, why are we here tonight? Well, we're here because Renee from the Clinton County IDA asked us to come here and to present. We've gone through our entire process, our approvals have been given, but talking with your superintendent several times on the phone, he basically said that we should take and explain what's in it for the Beekmantown Central School District students. And first of all, I just wanted to assure you that we were not asking for your approval this evening. We were using the standard payment in lieu of tax program that basically comes as a right if you qualify for the program. I can take and tell you that this project would not have happened because the finances wouldn't have worked if we didn't have the ability to go through the IDA. As it relates for the school district, the assessment that's been on this property for years is going to remain. The pilot portion is only upon the new part, and you'll immediately get the 50% of that particular pilot. Bhavik is also has experience of working with students in other parts of the state that he has hotels of having them come in under internships or summer jobs, etc. So that's important to someone who has enough faith in your community that they're investing their private capital here. The other item, different from maybe some residential subdivisions, there'll be no little yellow school buses pulling up here in the morning or the afternoon, picking up any students. So whatever happening here is going to be positive for the community. So thank you very much for having us here this evening, and if you have any further questions or want clarification, the three of us will be here at your disposal.
I have a question. So if you don't mind me asking, what is the investment that you plan on putting into your hotel?
Right now, we're still in the construction document stage where we have to go out to bidding, but it's going to be close to $4 million.
Thanks.
And I think from a positive standpoint, that you'll have a hotel here now in the Plattsburgh area that's as modern as they can come. So if you have friends or relatives coming in from out of town and they need a place to stay, you'll have the best accommodations that's currently being made by the industry.
I have 3 questions. One, do you have any other agreements besides the pilot agreement with any of the other taxing jurisdictions, like any host community agreements, any other agreements whatsoever?
The only agreements we have are with the Clifton County IDA, and Renee is here. You want to tell what the 3 areas that we have pilots or the arrangements with?
Sure. So Trustworthy LLC submitted an application to the IDA for sales tax abatement, mortgage recording tax abatement, and the payment in lieu of tax arrangement. So the way the IDA has their uniform tax exemption policy, you can qualify within 3 categories for a pilot structure that already exists that all of the taxing jurisdictions agreed to many years before I came on board. But what Trustworthy LLC qualified for was a tier 2. So on, again, just the expanded portion and the additional value of the renovations, they will begin by paying 50% of what the full assessed value would have been, and then in year 2, they'll pay 55%, and then year 3, 60%, so on and so forth until it winds down in year 11. They'll pay the full tax bill on that portion. They will continue to pay everything that they have been paying on the original assessed value of the building.
Just for clarification, is that the pilot component, is that to the increased value assessment, or is it to the whole assessment?
Just the increased value assessment from this work.
Okay, so that's a big point of clarification, is the concern here has always been our revenue reduction, right? So if you guys already pay X and a pilot comes in and modifies that and the X gets reduced to minus something, that's always a concern. So just to be clear, so this is, the X will still get, now there's new increased in value assessment, and the pilot is only on that increased in pilot assessment.
That is correct.
Okay.
You do realize that one of the reasons why we passed a resolution before you arrived, Renee, was that those pilots actually will hurt the school district on our tax cap formula, and there's no recoup value on the backside in year 12, I guess it would be. So that will have a negative impact on the school district and how we raise the monies to educate our kids. Renee, you said they qualified under tier 2. I have read the qualified tax exempt policy, and there's no deviation from the policy. It's a clear tier 2. And what components within that policy, like job creation, what were the components that allowed donations to education is one of those components, I think.
That was on a different assignment of points.
Right.
But it was the percent of the average county wage is something we take into consideration, the spin-off jobs, the amount of the investment, the willingness to work with our local educational and training institutions, and the market need for this kind of product, as well as the synergy with other local resources.
Also, the increase in sales and occupancy taxes.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
And then the last question I had was, it's a 50%, and I understand the steps up to year 11. We haven't seen any projections on those pilots. They haven't been forwarded to us, and so is it going to be, have you talked to the other taxing jurisdictions? And is it going to be a clear, precise split based on the current tax?
That is correct.
Okay, the current tax collections, I guess, of each entity. Land tax?
What was that?
Just on land tax? Like not on sales tax or anything else like the county and the
Right.
town?
It's your pro rata share.
My pro rata share, okay.
And just I guess for everyone's information, the Clinton County IDA will not approve a diversion, which is what you're talking about.
I was wondering if there was a diversion.
No, and
Right.
the board won't approve a diversion, nor will our attorneys allow the board to approve a diversion without the taxing jurisdiction's affirmative consent to that.
Well, that's good news. Thank you. That is.
I appreciate you sending the PowerPoint earlier, so we got to go through it just because 3,850,000. And I noticed you guys had like a 200,000 contingency extra and then all the legal fees. So all that was included into the max cost. And you had about 4 new jobs being created. Just for clarity, you had an experienced general manager. Is this supposed to be someone that's another general manager, or are you replacing the one that's already there?
With this type of brand, you need a more experienced general manager, that takes on a higher salary. And we also, with the increased occupancy that's projected with being part of a stronger brand in the reservation system, there'll be additional jobs created with front desk and housekeeping staff as well. And also a salesperson that currently the property does not support.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a clear, transparent component to the job thing. So you have essentially 4 new people on here, right?
Correct.
And so the experienced general manager, you really already have one, so you really just
We're
not
actually seeking a new one right now.
sticking in. So you'll replace one with another one. So that's, all right. And the sales thing, what is this chief engineer? That's,
Maintenance.
oh, it's maintenance, okay. I'm an engineer, so I'm a little confused there, right there. So you don't have a maintenance person now?
We do, but we're gonna have an additional person.
Okay, so you have one more. And then executive housekeeper, you're gonna have 2 of them?
We would have a supervisor and an executive housekeeper. The model of an economy branded hotel
Yeah.
changes a little bit
Yeah,
when you go to upper mid-scale. There's more supervisor positions, and with higher occupancy levels, there'll be more front desk, housekeeping, and breakfast as well.
Any issue, just a curiosity, with the other Holiday Inn that's already here?
From my understanding, that will be leaving the system. It'll still remain operating as a Holiday Inn. I'm not sure what flag they're going to change.
Oh. Interesting. Does anybody have any questions on the impact to community cost of the pilot or anything like that?
I do want to thank the IDA for actually not deviating from the policy now and in the future. That's great news for the district. And I do wish you guys well in your business, and I do see how it can help our local economy. What we watch out for here is our local economy, and obviously how we educate the kids without becoming a tax burden like some of our other. So a lot of the neighboring school districts have areas that are untaxable, or they're in agreements that raises everybody else's taxes, and we don't want to find ourselves in that situation with an unsustainable tax requirement by our homeowners.
Let me just add one item on closing, to just tell you how working with your economic developers can be very beneficial. I did 13 years at the Saratoga Economic Development Corp. 2 of our projects down at exit 16 was the big Target distribution center and the Ace Hardware distribution. Ace got the standard pilot, but when Target came in, and they're employing 1,000 people there at that location now, they wanted a 10-year no tax, no increase on what the value of the land was there. And our #1 supporter was the South High superintendent of schools. And his basic comment was, 10 years goes by very quickly. That was 15 years ago. Today, that school district is reaping a tremendous benefit from those 2 distribution centers. Saratoga County as a whole, with Global Foundries and other companies, is reaping a tremendous benefit. Probably the only county that's increasing in size, and that all came about with 13 years of working with the school district, working with the towns, the villages, to see that economic development, I know what your job is, but by taking and working together, and again, remember that formula that 100% of nothing is nothing, and a lot of other places are getting nothing because they won't take and work cooperatively. So with that, I look forward to continuing a positive relationship with you as we do more work here in the North Country area. And if you have concerns, talk to Renee and get them aired out, because it is a good program and it does ultimately benefit you and your students. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad to find out that it's not affecting the original base.
Right. You keep X, and it just starts with 50% of water.
Of the other one. That's really good.
Good. Thank you.
All right. Any other thoughts, Dan?
I'll do them during my presentation.
Okay. All right. Health insurance.
Mr. Parks is here.
Yes, Mr. Parks.
Mr. Parks, if you want to come on up, we can move.
Is he hiding back there? Oh, that's why I didn't see him.
So John is a former superintendent of Saranac Central School District. It's a long history in education around here, and has been a partner of ours on the consortium and the board of directors for a number of years. And upon his retirement, he's taken over the term as health consortium administrator. Is that correct? You like that one?
Yeah, sure.
All right, plan administrator. And he's on track, he's keeping track of everything with regards to health insurance, and we have, as I voiced before, we have serious concerns about just our usage and a couple other components of our current health insurance program. So John, do you want to take it away?
I've been a part of this insurance consortium since 1990, insured by it since then. It really, for most of those years, it was a plastic card that I could take to the emergency room when I put the bobsled or wrecked my bike or broke something, and it really didn't think about it that much. But as I became a superintendent and started looking into this quite a bit, I was just surprised at how much I didn't know about this plan. So what I'm going to do is just start off with a few things, some factual information about this consortium. Then I'm going to move into a few areas and trends that I think are raising some concerns, and just make you aware of those as we go forward. The plan is a minimum premium plan, which is a definition that really means that a health insurance plan administers and pays our claims, but then sends the bills on to us. They do provide a little bit of month-to-month cash flow protection, meaning that they'll never charge us more in a month above a certain level, but if we go above that, we still owe that to them. So basically, we are a self-insured entity. We pay 100% of the claims for 4,645 contracts, and this is as of the end of 2018, 9,750 people. That includes obviously active retirees, spouses, and dependents. This plan would be defined as a rich plan as far as the benefit goes. If you look at what the plan cost per member is, so that's for each one of those 9,700 people, the plan paid a little over $8,000 in 2018. The out-of-pocket contribution toward the plan, copay members, well, mostly active members, but members also pay a percentage of premium, quite a few of them. And when you factor that in, overall the cost is about 90/10, meaning that overall for all costs, the school districts pay 90% of the healthcare costs, and the members, on average, pay 10%. Most of our retirees don't pay a percentage of premium in retirement. That's mostly their active that are something like that. We are budgeted for approximately $91 million in costs this year. And somebody asked me, what you're retiring, but you're going from a $33 million a year business to a $91 million a year business. What's wrong with you? I often ask myself this now that I'm into this job. But it's a big number. It's huge. 58 million in medical claims, 29 million in prescription claims. Our fees and our admins we project to be about $3 million this year. That seems like a big number. It is, and let's take a look at why and what we think those numbers mean, where they're coming from. I want to talk about a few trends that we're starting to see that will raise a little bit of concern. Specialty drugs are a considerable cost to us. You can see there, Humira is their cost per script, $5,000, and that's per month. That's what the cost of that is. Somebody asked me, how do I know how do I know if it's a specialty drug or not? And the indicator there is if it has its own television commercial. It's most likely it's a specialty drug. And obviously, a pretty good chunk of that $5,000 a month is going to television production and the purchase of that. But that advertising campaign works. They sell more drugs because they're advertising on TV. Pretty sure we're the only, one of the only countries in the world that allows direct marketing to consumers on television. And there are a few problems that come along with that. You can probably think of a few right now. But just to put things in perspective, the average generic drug costs our plan about $21 a month. The average brand name drug costs our plan about $270 a month. The average specialty drug costs our plan $4,000 a month. $4,000.
Wow.
And that's a pretty considerable number. And it's a trend when these numbers are going up. Like I said, this is from December 2018. Humira is now over 5,100. Enbrel is 48. And Stelara down at the bottom is now costing about $5,900 a month. So I think one of the issues is that drug companies set their own prices. They don't have to negotiate them with anyone, except for Medicare, or Medicaid, and VA. They have to negotiate prices with them. But otherwise, they just whatever they can get is what they're going to charge for the drugs. These are the top 10 high cost claims for 2018. Just those upper right-hand corner, those are two highest cost claims. 5 years ago, if you had said to us, there's a possibility that you might have $1 million claim, we probably would have thought, yeah, that's not going to happen, because our high cost claims weren't coming anywhere near that, and we certainly never would have thought that we would have seen $1.1 and $1.3 million claims. And just as a point of fact, and I'll get to it a little bit more later on, number 2, the multiple myeloma, out of that $1.1 million, over $700,000 of that was in prescription drug costs. And that $1.1 million was only for 8 months of treatment. These are just some general categories and what we spent last year. These are just medical claims. This is a little more recent, coming up to the end of the plan year. But drugs on medical are drugs that are given by medical professionals in a hospital setting. Could be outpatient, could be inpatient. These are drugs that you can't send somebody home with. Most of these drugs are volatile. They need to be refrigerated, or and they need to be administered by a physician. 90% of them are cancer drugs, chemotherapy drugs, immunotherapy drugs, CAR T drugs. Last year, our charge for drugs on medical was $5.5 million. And if you look at overall drug trends, we would have expected an increase of about $500,000 on that $5.5 million. Instead, just in this one category alone, we saw a 65% increase in drugs on medical. And looking at the new drugs that are coming to the market, cancer drugs that are coming to the market, the average new chemotherapy drug brought to market now costs about $10,000 a month. The average new immunotherapy drug brought to the market now costs about $30,000 a month. And that's a trend that I think is going to continue unless there's some relief from that somewhere else. But that's a concern.
Excuse me, real quick, on the drugs on medical,
Yep.
is any of that impacted, besides the drug cost itself increase, is because that's administered in the hospital, is any of that impacted by procedure change, policy change, whether it's a hospital or a clinic kind of thing? Does that impact any of that, or is it just an increase in the drug cost?
John, when you ask that, just to tag along with Ed, would there be any new billing procedures within the hospital? So when somebody comes in to have that drug administered, are they now being billed for not just the drug, but for things that previously, in maybe 4 years ago, 3 years ago, we wouldn't have been billed for?
So this category is just for the cost of the drug itself. It's not for the administration of the drug. So this is just what the hospital is charging for the drug, and based on what they're getting charged in the industry. I don't know of any change in procedure or mechanism for delivering that drug. I do know that one of the disadvantages of our area, because this is rural healthcare, is we don't have infusion centers. Where if you have a lot of places, if you're closer to a big city, instead of going to the hospital for your chemotherapy, you can go to an infusion center, and it might be in a strip mall. And there are independent infusion centers which provide competition to the hospital setting, which we don't have here, which is maybe a common theme that I might return to again.
Okay.
But just to answer your question, really I see this rise in cost driven by high-cost new drugs coming to the market. They are effective. They extend people's lives, which is a good thing. But from the cost side, you've extended someone's lives during which they continue to get this drug that costs
Sure.
$30,000 to $50,000 a month.
Right.
So that's what's the effectiveness gain. Makes a gain in cost for us going forward. It's great for their family because those people are going to be around a lot longer. But that's a trend we just have to focus on and be aware of going forward. These are our premium rates that we have for this year set. You're probably aware of the difference between Platinum 1 and Platinum 2. Just to note, the Platinum 1 family plan, 32802, in 2008 and 2009, that rate was almost exactly half of what it is now. So in 11 years, our premiums are driven 100% by cost. In 11 years, our costs have doubled. That's a pretty clear indicator. You notice that there is a difference between the premiums. There is, it's for each of those categories, it's 16.7%. Platinum 2 covers 95%. There's really only 2.5% difference. You saw on an earlier slide that 96.5% is what the total plan cost is. Well, that's between these two numbers. These two plans are very, very similar. And they are both very rich plans. Those premiums are pretty high. We'll take a minute here and just, take a look at how did they get so high? And they've, I'd say the majority of those increases have come in the last 2 to 3 years. I won't read that to you. I'll let you take a look at that. Remember that meeting, Mr. Mannix? That was
Remember
that was
well.
not a fun one. Basically, we walked into a superintendent's meeting. We were told this plan is going to go for 3 months. So an ad hoc committee was formed to investigate and take a look at things. It was 5 superintendents, A. Paul Scott, Cynthia Johnston, Jay LeBrun, Dan Maybeard from Keene, and myself. And so we met just about every week for a couple of months, going through a lot of data, taking a look at things. And we didn't expect to find one smoking gun and say this is the one reason why things are happening like this, but we found a few. The board of directors was taking action to lower fund balance. One of my first meetings as superintendent 6 years ago, I think it was Mr. Mannix brought to my attention that our fund balance and our reserves was a pretty high percentage of our paid claims. It was somewhere around 60%. If you had 60% reserves and fund balance here in Beekmantown, somebody is going to come and say, don't do that. So we did have the discussion of bringing that down. We had a major increase in high-cost claims. Normally, year to year, we were pretty flat. We'd have 30 high-cost claims, averaged about $200,000 a piece, and that was the same for 3 or 4 years before that. Starting in March of 2017, we added 20 more in that second half of that year. 20 new cases at $200,000 a piece, $4 million that we really didn't expect. $4 million of incurred not paid funds were not included in the end of year costs when we projected where we were going to be for the 17-18 year, and that was a big hit. And outpatient services began to increase around that time as well. And so basically, right there, we expected about a $3 million loss, but we realized about a $14 million loss, and that was a big hit. And it was a perfect storm. All happened within a 6-month period of time. You recall January 2018, we raised premium rates 10%. We took a $6.2 million reserve and just poof, it was gone. That was, at the time, that was about a month's worth of claims, and we just used that to pay for the claims for that month, and suddenly that reserve just disappeared. And we set a 13.5% rate for 18-19. Looking back on that, knowing what I know now, 16 would have been a better number, probably a more realistic number to keep us on even ground. Although, in 18-19, we finished the year with a positive cash flow. That was the first time in 3 years that the consortium did not lose money. We also, that ad hoc committee became an advisory committee, and we brought to the table labor, retirees, business officials, and active teachers as well. And really, this is a group that meets every month, closely analyzes financial reports, takes a look at claims data, and analyzes trends. And this is a really good, first of all, tool to take a look at how we're doing, but also everybody who's at the table has a stake in this. And made a couple of plan changes, $100 copay for ER visits, and we added telemedicine at no cost to the users. We have a couple of proposed changes that are subject to approval. We haven't heard back on that. Those would be scheduled to start January 1st. This is why we put the copay on emergency room. Our low acuity ER visits, those are things that where you didn't really need to go to the ER, cost us about $1,600 a piece, and we had about 1,000 of them. And that's quite a difference. And you can see what the comparative costs would be. Much cheaper if they could have gone to see their doctor or gone to use telemedicine instead. The plan is to add a copay for imaging and lab services that are hospital-based, because you can see the price differences. Independent imaging centers, $258 for CTs, $712 at the hospital. And obviously, this is an average cost because not every CT is exactly the same, not every X-ray is exactly the same. They're all a little bit different, but these are overall per case costs for these things.
Can you,
There is no, by the way, there are independent alternatives in Plattsburgh, after-hours imaging for X-ray and CT and ultrasound, and bioreference as well for lab. They're in the same building on Route 3. There is no local MRI. CVPH and UVN Health Network bought all of the local MRIs. They own all of them. The closest independent MRI is Burlington or Glennsville. But if I had shown you the difference between independent MRI and hospital-based MRI, it's similar to this, it only just added 0 at the end of these numbers.
you made a quick mention of telemedicine. Could you clarify that?
Yes, telemedicine we started offering in January of this year.
Uh-huh.
And actually, we have signed up close to 700 members. We have 700 accounts. And in talking to people that use it, I talked to somebody they were actually sitting in the waiting room. Their kid was sick, sitting in the waiting room at the kid's doctor's office, and they're waiting. They signed up for telemed while they were waiting there and got the kid in on telemed before they got into the doctor's office. So usually about 10-15 minutes, you're on the phone or on Skype with a doctor, and people love it, especially if you're on vacation, you're not anywhere near somebody that you know. The cost to that for the plan is $40 for that visit. It used to be a co-insurance, 20% co-insurance. We waived that to try and encourage people to sign up.
For people who don't have, if they don't use technology like we do, if they're retired or whatever,
Yep.
is there any value in having a telemedicine location that they can go to instead of going
There
to
is,
the
but
hospital?
Telemedicine is also telephone. You
Right,
call them
right.
and they'll call you back, and then they'll have a telephone conference with you. They don't have to see that you're actually, that they trust you.
Yeah,
when they
right.
talk. But I have heard some feedback from some retirees who use them, and they're appreciative that they don't have to get in the car and make the trip and go to the doctor's office, and you get in much quicker. We also have mental health counseling available as a telemedicine service now as well. So that's a much quicker. Now that's not instant, meaning that you still have to make an appointment with those docs. But instead of a 2-month wait, it might be 2 days or 3 days. This is just in general things. We are just, in general, higher cost than other areas. That has something to do with our rural nature, has something to do with the association of the UVM Health Network. They're not a monopoly, but they behave like one as far as the impact that they have, the leverage they have in negotiating prices with insurance companies. There's no option for insurance companies. And this is not just local. This is not a local trend only. This is a national trend. Hospital systems are getting much bigger and much more strength in the market. this is just some recent information. I gave a presentation similar to this in September, but we've got some more recent news. May 2019, we hit a record high for a claims month. That's almost $7.7 million for the month of May. And in August of 2019, broke that record. These are not records we really want to be achieving. We do have a budget. You know, if we budgeted our claims, $7,590,000 a month would put us on budget for our claims. So obviously, $7.8 million is above budget. If we had 10 more months like August, we would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million over budget for claims. Looking back and burrowing into the data, claims cost for a month is a factor. It's the claims that are made and billed in that month, and then some from the previous month. August was our highest month because July was a really high month. And July wasn't as high a month as far as claims cost because June was a low month. So basically that's that. And our inpatient costs went up incredibly, 85% in July and August. And that may be because those high cost claimants were moving from outpatient to inpatient services. A lot of times in cancer, at some point, your treatment moves you into the hospital for a period of time. But in that period of time, those cost claims went up about $1 million. Our specialty drug prescriptions is continuing on an upward trend of 20%. It's 20% higher than the same period last summer. And remember, those are the ones that cost us about, on average, $50,000 a year. Two things that are happening with the consortium. We have a new chairperson, Jay LeBrun from Plattsburgh, and he recently sent out a letter. We tried a broad distribution to get it out to as many people as possible. One of the things that he said in that letter is we need to be nimble and we need to be able to make changes in this consortium so that we can ensure the health of this consortium 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And he's right. We need to be quicker at making changes. The RFP process for the insurance carrier, we're in that process right now. We've received proposals from both our current carrier and other carriers, and we've made a commitment to continue that process into the future. We want to go through that process about every 3 years. So the incumbent has to sharpen their pencil and compete against who else is out in the market out there. And that's what we're looking at now. We may stay with the incumbent, we may change. So that is a possibility. There's only two outcomes in that process: is we stay with who we have, or we hire somebody new. Hiring somebody new is a change. There are people that will recognize why we're changing and the reason for it, and there's some people who will not. And hopefully they won't come here and talk to you. They'll talk to me instead. But that's a reality. Is these changes will probably disrupt some people's thoughts of what health insurance should be for them. It might not look exactly like it looks today, or looks like it looked like 10 years ago. But we want to ensure that this plan is here 10 years from now. We're looking at a new administration structure, so that there's not only a home, but there's a consistent staff and a full-time staff for this consortium. You have a budget that's probably less than half of what we'll spend on health claims this year for the consortium. Look at how many people you have to run the business of this district. I'm part-time and work out of my home, which is working fine in transition, but Mr. Mannix and I would agree that this role needs to be a full-time person, full-time administrator with their own staff in a location where everybody knows that that's the health insurance location. Okay, that's what we're looking at, and we're looking at what the cost for that would be. The advisory committee will continue to meet and look at claims and trend analysis, and with the possible outcome of changes to the plan. I costs have been on school districts, and I've lived it. We can't continue this trend, in our area school districts. It's every time this plan goes up double digits, it's a cost to something else in your program. And some districts are impacted much more severely than others. We're starting to see that already. That kind of road this year. We removed quite a few plans that really just couldn't continue to track the increase in health insurance. And it's also, it's a national issue, really. Nationwide, this country spends between $9,000 and $10,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. That much per person with 8, 9, 10% increases every year is not sustainable nationwide. We're not going to solve that problem here in Beekmantown or Saranac or Plattsburgh, but really it is something that we hope to get some help with on the national level.
Well, your one slide alone showed July, August, specialty drugs went up 20%. So,
The number of prescriptions, yep.
oh, the number, not the cost.
I don't have the cost off the top of my head, but it was probably close.
I mean, it's just kind of alarming that whether the cost or the increase of use, if it's going to be that aggressive, I mean, what's our projection here for next year, right? I mean,
Yeah, but, and I'd love to hear that conversation in a boardroom where, in a pharmaceutical company where they're talking about cost and what can we, how far can we keep going up and still keep making this kind of money. But you're right, it's a trend that's not sustainable, no way. So somebody, when I did this presentation at CVES, a friend of mine followed me. He was there, it was John, he was from United Way. He said, "Thanks, Mr. Parks, for lighting up the room before my presentation." I don't mean this to be doom and gloom. Over the past year, 2 years, the oversight and the management of this consortium has improved considerably. And that's, I mean, we're doing whatever we can to try and make sure that this is something that exists for our employees, our retirees, and everything going forward. We're working hard at making sure that this can be there.
I retired from the city school district 11 years ago. I do not pay in for insurance. I'm a retiree.
Right.
Now, a few years ago, as you know, we went through where they were raising, and there were a number of very loud outcry from retirees, okay, who retired, quite a while ago, and they had given up things while they were working so that they wouldn't have to start paying for insurance, or so they wouldn't have to pay for insurance. Is there a cutoff? I mean, am I gonna start paying insurance, or putting in for it? Is there a cutoff? And is Medicare being taken into consideration? For example, my insurance, if I retired at 52, you'd be paying the whole shot.
Yep.
Now I'm 73, and Medicare pays part, and, the district pays part.
Yeah, so right now, the changes that we look at for plan changes in regards to, I kind of went through it quickly. The advisory committee takes a look at possible plan changes with labor at the table, and they vote on and agree on that. Right now, those changes are limited to Plan 2. You're Plan 1. So we're at this point don't have plans to touch Plan 1 to make changes to Plan 1 because we have. Well, I think you lived through this in Beekmantown at some point. So that's you know how much fun that is. So so no, that's not the plan. And I don't know that we would look to have you pay in, but a plan change might be a change in deductible or copay or co-insurance. It might add a copay to some services and whatnot, or it might be some change in what you pay for prescription drugs. So those are the types of plan changes we would look at. But at this point, we don't have a Plan 1 is not on our radar right now.
Okay, so, right at this point, if the retirees, they hear about this, they're gonna get concerned. And
Yep.
of course, they're gonna be going, so at this point, we can tell them, no, it's not, you're not paying, or it's not going up, or you're not paying.
At
So
this point.
squ-
And
so-
there's quite a few retirees show up at our consortium meetings
Yeah.
now, and they're well represented.
Yeah, we have
And
Rod,
they talk to each other quite a bit, so yeah, we've
Yeah,
had
that's what I
that
mean,
question.
it's just, okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Rod Sherman's on our
Yeah.
advisory board. And back in about 7 years ago, when the Board of Education of Beekmantown looked at this, there was a legal mechanism to impact retirees, and they were discussing that. But since that discussion, those court cases have been overturned. So there's no legal mechanism for any one of our school districts to go to retirees and say, you have to start paying more contributions into the district. What John's saying is you may see plan changes where right now your specific out-of-pocket max is $400 and your deductible is $50. That could change, but there hasn't been any discussion to impact. I don't think any to impact Plan 1 people.
Not on Plan 1 at this time. And remember, those deductibles and copays, when they were set, years and years ago, when people were giving up things to get those plans, those deductibles and copays were a much higher percentage of what the actual cost was. Since they stayed stable, they're not percentages, they didn't raise as the cost of health insurance raised. So that benefit, that health insurance benefit improved considerably over time. 15 years ago, these plans weren't covering 95 and 97% of healthcare costs. They were covering 88, 89% of healthcare costs, and then the other cost was coming out of the pocket of the plan member. So there was never a mechanism to keep that share stable, and it just kept building and building. So the district just keeps paying more and more and more of the healthcare costs of each individual. And that's the thing that got us here is that it's a rich plan that keeps getting richer and costing the districts more and more.
Can you just clarify for me the timeline for, as far as Plan 2, looking at bids from other insurance carriers? I heard you mention like every 3 years you're gonna revisit this, but right now, currently,
So-
in that 3-year time?
So in August, at the end of August, we received proposals. We put out a request for proposal in the beginning of the summer. And we got proposals from our incumbent, which is Excelis, and other companies that do the same thing we did. That process is at the point where we have interviewed the incumbent and another finalist. The decision as to what's going to happen there hasn't been finalized. The timeline is that change, if we're going to change, that change could be January 1st, could be July 1st. Those are the things that still need to be studied, and we continue to study what that is. That doesn't mean that the plan changed, just the person, the company that pays our claims for us and bills us for those would change. And the proposal, analyzing the proposal, we want to find the best deal, the most bang for our buck. And that's when I said we're going to do it every 3 years, because we found in this, when we were going through this process, oh wow, we should have done this much sooner. We should be doing this more often, because that gets our people, the incumbent to keep their costs low, because they know in 3 years they're going to be compared to another person out in the market who's hungry for that business. So that's what I meant by that. Any other?
Is there any way that I can just add acres and, allowable?
Sure.
I don't really like sticking myself into this because I feel as a building principal that I'm neglectful in the sense that for me, health insurance is kind of one of those out there things that I know is a problem for the consortium and I need to become more aware of. But we recently had a couple of staff members in my building that have tried the telemedicine and things went really well for them and they were really impressed with it. And the dialogue that happened regarding it in the building was great, but I think part of the downfall is that not enough of them are aware enough of things like telemedicine. And of the very, I think that this slide presentation broke it down very well and very simplistically, being able to see the difference between the specialty meds versus other medicines. And I think sometimes the conversation may be above the heads of those people that are within it and using the insurance. So I don't know if there's creative ways to kind of get that
this show at districts, for districts employees. I've been to 6 districts so far. I can come back and do this for employees as well. As, you know, in regards to telemedicine, they'll come here and sign your folks up. You know, they'll spend a day here you know, I think the conversation regarding this is getting better. You know, we weren't talking about this 3 or 4 years ago. Like I said, it was as simple as, here's my card, what's this do for me? But, you know, we hadn't put that emergency room change into play until July 1st. But when we look at the first 6 months of 2019, our low acuity ER use was down 16%. And it's just a matter of, it's sometimes the most effective conversations about this and the most effective marketing occurs peer to peer. And so the conversations are occurring. I don't disagree. We could do a much better job marketing, and that's when we change the structure of this is something that we'll look at. It's also part of the proposal process. We ask them about how will you help with marketing this, and how will you work with our consultant to put a marketing plan out there and an information plan out there. And then we've had that discussion. You know, it's gonna be a good point. I don't know how long board meetings can be. Don't take up any more of your time.
Thanks, John.
No more
Thank you.
questions? Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Nice job, Dave. Thank you.
So as he alluded, since it's a night of
What's that?
technical information,
Yeah, a lot of info.
these 3 presentations.
So maybe I can just preface this. So, our 3 through 8 data became available to us about the last week of August, and I immediately forwarded to the board some news on that, and then we saw a lot of different things within the data, and we saw we reflected on the data, and we saw some things that maybe we can do better in the future. We've been in this situation before and actually driven strong improvement over the last 7 years or so, 6 years or so. So a couple of items I think we might talk about here. We're also shared with the Board of Education on a plan that was adopted with the principals. The principals and I sat together and adopted a plan which we can all get behind to attack our 3 through 8 assessment data. And some of what you're gonna see is very good. Some of what you're gonna see like, oh, we need to improve there. We're gonna say, you're absolutely right. We have a plan of action. We're not waiting. We're already engaged in a lot of different areas to see some improvement in the areas that need improvement. So I'll throw it out and hand it over to who's ever first, as that looks like Principal Nelson.
As Mr. Minnick said, looking at the 3 through 8 state assessment data, we saw areas that improved. And strength for each of our buildings at grade level. But we also want to keep in mind that this is just one indicator that we use to look at the progress for all our students. And so we have STAR, we have DIBBLES, and other programs that we use to help monitor our student progress. We have data teams at each building, and we also have our grade level teams that work in analyzing this data and creating plans to help support our students. A couple of things to highlight. There have been some significant changes to state testing in the last few years. And to highlight specifically for this last spring, we did computer-based testing throughout grades 3 through 8 in both ELA and math, as opposed to the prior year, we did grade 6 ELA and math and just grade 7 ELA. So that is one significant change. And then we did vendor scoring throughout grades 3 through 8. So those are 2 significant changes that were made this past spring with regards to testing. Another highlight we wanted to point out to you is that over the years since 2014, Even though opt-outs have fluctuated up and down, there has been a downward trend, a pattern, a downward trend with regards to opt-out. So we've increased the amount of students that we are testing.
Can we just take a look at those numbers? If you see down at the bottom, you're talking 210 back in 14-15 to 156 right now. 210, you might say that's a large number of students that have opted out of a particular assessment. It's always higher in math. It seems like it kind of catches, things seem to go in the opposite direction than we would like. That actually, those numbers are actually lower than almost every other school district. Every year we were the highest. We had the highest participation rate. This past year, I think 1 or 2 districts actually jumped in front of us. But with that many kids opting out, we were still the best in the region for having kids participate.
And I think a lot has to do with the fact that we're trying to build awareness with regards to how we're using these tests to evaluate our buildings as a whole performance and how we can make some changes to improve student performance on these exams. And so that has, I think, impacted the decrease of opt-outs in our buildings. So the next two slides are overall look at ELA and math scores 3 through 8. This is with all of the information from all of the buildings. And as we get further into the presentation, we will show you how those are separated out into each particular building. So if you look at the last column, there's an actual percentage of students pertaining proficiency at levels 3 and 4. And again, throughout the presentation, we'll show you how these numbers look as we separate the buildings and compare the different cohorts across time. We have other graphs that are a little bit easier to look at. So you want to take a moment and
Could you clarify the numbers on the?
So if you look at ELA 3 in the year 2019, 15% of the kids achieved levels 3 and 4. Moving across the board, there's 20% achieving levels 3 and 4, and so on.
A very simplistic way to look at these bar graphs are you seeing kind of a staircase that would indicate some type of improvement? And if you see like the stairs going down, that would indicate that we didn't, it would indicate that we didn't have the desired impact we wanted that particular area in that particular grade.
So overall, if you look at 18 and 19 and compare, there's an overall downward trend. Grade 7 went up. Grade 5.
But you could follow the same cohort, right?
Mm-hmm.
From year to the next,
Yep.
using the different, yeah.
Hold on, this one. That was the LA. We have math. Again, we want to look right here. The cohort data is on the next slide so that you can easily see how grade 3 would have done as grade 4 and then so on, how those grade 3 students would have done through the years in 3, 4, and 5. So,
There's cohort data.
What-
So as you can see, there's some ups and downs. Again, 18 and 19, still looking on a lower trajectory except for grade 7 math. And the next couple slides will break apart the cohort data and the building information.
Could you go back to that last one? So if I were to look at that 53 there in grade 7, right? Math 7?
Yep.
The year before that, that same cohort was at about 45, the green, right?
Correct. Correct.
And the year before that, they were under 40 in the red, Math 5.
Correct.
I think you'll like the next chart.
So the trend is positive. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, the next chart has it a little bit more precise. This one's easier for me to follow.
So this is the same exact data. So the number inside of these boxes are showing you percentages that have achieved levels 3 and 4. So for example, in 2015, in 8th grade math, 21% achieved proficiency at level 3 and 4. going the diagonals down, you can follow a cohort from 2015, the third graders, 47% achieved proficiency, 36%, 51%, 46, 53% by the time they were in seventh grade. So those colors on the diagonal allow you to watch the cohorts from one year to the next, which is the same information on the bar graph, but it's just a little bit easier to follow
Step down, yeah, okay.
as you're looking at the cohorts. And you can also use this to look going across a grade band as seventh grade math, how have they year after year been achieving? You know, as a team of teachers looking at what they're achieving with their students. So that's just the same information, just viewed a little bit differently. So, as we kind of said when we started, this year in my building at BES, the 3 through 5 data for ELA and math are both very dismal. We have been looking as a team from not only that building, but at a district level as well. We have sat down as an administrative team, as Mr. Mannix pointed out, and we've put together a strategic plan. We've also had a meeting with Terry Calabrese-Gray and Amanda Zulu from CVES to talk about how we can use their support and their services to help guide us in taking a deep dive look into our data and what it's showing us and what we can see for trends and where some of our holes in our instruction are happening. The one bit of information to know is that as we've talked to Amanda and we've talked to Terry, they have said this isn't just a Beekmantown issue. That as a whole in our BOCES, we are finding that traditionally, you know, the last 6 to 10 years, we were performing above the RIC, which is the Regional Information Center, which contains 7 BOCES. And we are finding that as a BOCES, we are now performing below the RIC. So we need to look as a region at how are we falling down in our scores. So we are doing a deep dive, and I know that all of the other local schools are doing a deep dive as well. But that's not to say that it takes any pressure off from us, because not only as we are as a region performing low, we as a district were bringing up the rear all together with those other districts. So we need to really, you know, button down and figure out what is it that we're doing and where are the holes coming for us. So if you take a look, this is ELA in my building, and 2019 is the orange bars. So in 5th grade, 4th grade, and 3rd grade, all 3 grade levels, we saw a decrease from achievement from 2018. And as we take a look at those, there have been some years that, you know, we've been doing okay and making a positive trend, but as a whole last year for ELA, we certainly saw a decrease in achievement. And there could be a whole slew of exterior factors that we could look at the first time we were doing computer-based testing in grades 3, 4, and 5. The problems that computer-based testing had last year, the vendor scoring piece, you know, that was an opportunity that, looking at it, it would allow more time for our teachers to be in the classroom. But there are big things that happen when you go to regional scoring that are very positive. Teachers that are like grade levels get to sit together, and if I'm a teacher at Beekmantown, I may be looking at kids from Shazy or Northern Adirondack or Northeastern and being able to see, wow, you know, a 4th grader really wrote this and achieved this, and then I can go and talk to the teachers from Northeastern and say, hey, how do you get your kids to rate to this level? Or how do you get your kids to be able to figure out these types of problems? And it allows for a lot of collaboration. So we've certainly taken a look at, is vendor scoring having something to do with it? Does the computer-based testing have something
Sarah,
to do with it?
can I jump in on computer-based testing? Because everybody might not be aware, but I think it was unconscionable for the state not to remedy the computer-based testing scores. So our kids sat for ELA, specifically for ELA, they sat day 1. So there's a lot of anxiety coming into this. There's a lot of kids that have a lot of anxiety. It's one of the reasons why people opt out. I know my kids, they perform well, and they have a lot of anxiety going into this, maybe because they want to perform well, I don't know. But so they're all ready to go, teachers are ready to go, and they said, ready to go ahead and take your test, and we couldn't get on. And then we called people, whatever, and they said, wait 5 minutes and do it again. Okay, so the kids wait 5 minutes and do it again. So imagine in the SAT if that happened. Imagine the bar exam. Imagine taking your driver's test. If they said, no, turn the car off, wait 5 minutes, do it again. We did that for an hour and a half to 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and 10-year-old kids who are already coming into an exam. And then we're going to say, who are already coming into an exam with anxiety, and then we're going to say that this is a reliable, valid assessment this year. There's no way if you did that with the SAT, there's no way it'd be reliable. Now, here's the kicker for me is, we know state ed well. If one teacher did that with a paper and pencil test to one kid, there'd be a massive investigation by state ed that you just cheated a kid. State ed did that to every kid in this district, and it's okay. So it's really bothering me that in ELA, that there wasn't any adjustment or any just acknowledgement that that exam was inappropriately administered, not by our building principals, but by the New York City Education Department.
I was there when that, by the way.
Yeah, he was in my office when you called.
Kathy and I were both there for another meeting, and you, I think it was you called a couple times. Was on, wasn't on, couldn't log in, and could log in, whatever.
It was disappointing because we had our ed tech department there. We had practiced this with our students prior, maybe a week before. We had dry runs of this and we were ready. So on our end, and everything the ed tech department, like we were ready. It just, when it got down to it, the state wasn't ready and they didn't expect the platform to be flooded at 8:15, 8:30, 9 o'clock. So then, as a way to remedy that, they had us test the following day and do it in waves. So it went smoother for math, but it's definitely ELA. It wasn't a good setup.
And one particular reason which could have an impact on these scores, though.
Right, so the reason that I brought that up is that, yes, there are a number of external reasons that we could probably pinpoint and say, well, it could be computer-based testing, it could be vendor scoring, it could be this, and it could be that. But really, when we sit down and look at this, there are a ton of internal controls that we have that we can take a look at and say, okay, how do we remedy this? And what is it that we can take control of and do? So when we take a look at this, as we go to the math data, you're going to see that the math has a significant decrease as well. In third grade, from the green bar in 2018, which was just over 40% receiving proficiency, down to 24. Fourth grade was not stellar in 18 and was equally unstellar in 19. And then fifth grade had a drastic decrease as well. So across the board in ELA and math in my building, we did not see anywhere near the scores that we wanted to see. So looking at the next slide.
I'm sorry, if you go back to the last one, I'm sorry. But more interesting is that if you look at the Math 3 red bar, it drops by half every year going forward.
Well, years last year and this year, which the red bars.
No, I'm talking about the same cohort.
Well, let me just point out that in the last 2 years, we've had a new exam with a new score. That's why last year we talked about it. They said don't draw comparisons because it was
Okay.
the first year. So when you see a new score on there, don't necessarily say that's low achievement on the same exam. That's scored differently, so that it does play into the analysis.
Okay.
On the next slide, and even the slide that follows. So here's that cohort being able to look at it colors-wise a lot easier than on the bars. This is similar to the one that we had shown earlier, but this is just Beekmantown Elementary data, being able to follow third grade class as they go up, the fourth grade class as they go up, using that. But then on the next one, where you'll see the difference, Mr. Minutes is explaining that from 17 to 18, they had an exam change. So this graphic itself comes from something called School Meter, and we're calling this kind of a heat map. And what you're looking for is that you want to be, this is ideal, where you have your darkest color with the number 1. That means out of that cohort, out of that comparison to Clinton County, in grade 4 in the year 2014, we were at the top of the county. So when I pulled that data, looking at that in 2014, we ranked number 1 in Clinton County with a percentile rank of 92 and a percent receiving proficiency of 46, which still isn't stellar. But out of the county that year, we were the top. So that's why this is colored dark, and we have a number 1. So if you take a look at 18, 19, this side is ELA. 18, 19, over the last 2 years, we were at the lightest color, and we have the number 10, which means we are the bottom of the county. And so the same thing in math, if you look over here, you know, it's not horrible here. We had a score of a 6, meaning that we were in the 40th percentile. But again, nothing stellar over the last 2 years, and that has been a shift in the test that they were assessing. So this allows you to follow cohorts as well. So in 2016, the third grade cohort performed quite well, and then in 2017 as fourth graders they did, and then in 2018 as fifth graders, you see that there was a decline in their performance. So this one allows you to go cross grade levels, and we can see that in math, fifth grade traditionally has not been doing well at all with the state assessment. Fourth grade has had a few moments where they've been a little better, but we're not doing well the last few years. Third grade has a few spots where they were doing better in comparison.
So, and let me just, I mentioned to you, we've seen that we have the ability to improve before, because if you go back to 14, when 14 was at the other end, so we're at 19 now, when 14 was all the way here, or 15, we might have adopted school meter in 15, and you could go back all the way to like 2009. Though it was lighter on the far right side, and it was nice to see the darker colors come in, and you're going to see that at Cumberland Head, and you're going to see that at the middle school, and we got to get back to having those darker heat colors come back where we're performing higher than than the county or the RIC. And we can compare this to the RIC and the state and the whole BOCES any way you want to compare it.
So how does that, so that's the change test, you're saying 18, 19, right?
After the 17 year and starting the 18 year.
17, 18.
But that change test affects everybody.
Correct.
So even with the change test, it's affected us more, you think?
I think that there's a number of factors that come into
Okay,
that.
all right.
I do. So now that I've kind of laid out the dismal
Yeah,
piece of
yeah.
that, it's a matter of looking at what are we doing going forward and how are we going to make changes going forward? Because really at this point, there's only one way to go, which is up.
I will say I appreciate the not sugarcoating it. I think the best thing that I'm seeing is the ability to say, here's where we're at, going forward, what are we gonna do to fix it?
Yep.
Because in other places or in the past, may not have been that transparent, and I compliment you guys for that.
Yeah, and so number one, we own it, and we're going to own the improvement that hopefully you are going to see when we get back to darker colors. And we've done this before. We've seen the improvement before. But one of the reasons why we're having this conversation and owning this is it's hard work to get back to the darker colors, and not everybody likes that hard work. And it's really pushing instruction. It's making changes. Some of the changes are going back to some of the things we did before. Some of the changes are going to be new. But one thing we do know is that if we don't change, we don't improve, the state comes in and says, we're going to help you improve. And that process is really rigorous, and nobody likes that, because there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of time, and a lot of people saying to our professionals, hey, you've got to do this, that, and the other thing better. And that's really that can really work on the psyche as a professional educator. So we're ready to tackle it, and we own it, and we're ready to tackle the areas that need improvement.
So, as we mentioned earlier, we've been now meeting as an admin team several times to really have good, rich discussion about what are we seeing in our classrooms, what are we seeing as practices going on, where are the holes that we're seeing develop, and we're gonna spend some time in the coming months with Amanda and with Terry from CVES looking at the last couple of years of data to identify where are the spots, is it in ELA that we're, falling down on author's purpose? Is it in base 10 systems of understanding operations in math? Where are we seeing holes? Because there are some things that are happening from 3 all the way through 8 that we're seeing that we have instructional holes happening. So one thing that's good about tanking and going this low is that it's putting us in a situation to have a lot more rich dialogue around the type of instruction that we're seeing in our buildings. So we've also, like I mentioned earlier, met with Terry and Amanda, and we're going to continue to do that starting at the end of this month. They're going to be coming in and working in small teams with our teachers to be able to put the data in front of them and to be able to really take that deep dive with them and kind of dissect what it is that we're seeing as trends and holes and strengths and high points, and what are some of those low-lying pieces of fruit, as they call it, that will get those 2s to a 3, and we'll get those 3s to a 4, that we can try and tackle easily. There's a whole slew of kids that they're just missing being a level 3, by a question or 2. So trying to figure out where are some of those pieces, and when you have just, a handful of kids that can achieve that level 3 versus a level 2, that could be the difference of being, a pink level 10 on that to, a pretty dark level 4 on that, and really moving up the ranking in the county. So we are certainly making sure that we're not only looking at this as a 3 through 5 issue in my building, this is a K to 5 issue. This is something that as they come in as kindergartners, what are we laying the foundation with in ELA, and are we missing pieces as they go from K to 1 to 2? And like Duffy mentioned, we're not just looking at state data. We've got to look at our STAR scores that we use for progress monitoring. We've got to look at our DIBEL scores. We've got to look at our Fountas and Pinnell levels to see across the board, where is it that we're falling down with our students? And trying to alleviate having kids that come into 3rd grade when they're at a 1st grade reading level. And making sure that our RTI plan is up and running as efficiently and effectively as we can. So we're also analyzing all of our programming. For example, Terry and Amanda have pointed out that on the edreport.org, our Journey Series program that we are using currently is not meeting expectations and requirements according to that report. And teachers over the last couple of years have been pointing out where they feel that there's weaknesses in phonemic awareness in the primary grades. They feel as though there's weaknesses in writing across all grade levels. So now we've really got to take a look at that and say, what is it that we can do to supplement? And one of the biggest things in my building is making sure that we're putting standards in front of our teachers first. One of the trends that I have seen, and I saw it when I was in the classroom with teachers, and I see it now in my own building, is that when you have a basal reader, it's very easy to put the basal in front of you, and you just turn, and today's lesson, 16 from Unit 4 on page 75, and tomorrow is the next lesson. And that loses really the art and the craft of teaching. And the whole intent is that you need to have, the state is testing us on their standards. So we need to put our standards in front of us and say, which standard am I addressing? And every basal is the same. They're all gonna, point themselves out there as we hit every standard. And you probably can find one snippet of all of the standards in their lessons, but it's not rigorous, it's not high expectations, it's not really teaching to the lows and the middles and the highs in the classroom. So making sure that we're putting our standards in front of our teachers first, and then using the Journeys book as a resource to pull from, and figuring out how do we best teach those standards to the students, and how do we raise our expectations? Because there are times that when you have a 3rd grader who's reading at a 1st grade level, as a teacher you may think, oh, if I read aloud the test to everybody, that's going to be better because it's going to level the playing field. Well, then we go sit them in front of a state exam, and nobody's reading aloud the test, and the kids aren't ready for that level of rigor and that level of expectation. So making sure in my building, one of the things we've been talking about is raising the expectations of the students, making sure that from one week to the next, we're actually asking of them what we're gonna ask for of them in the spring of each year, so that they don't come and sit in front of this test and think, oh my goodness, I have no idea what this is that they're asking me. So looking at all of those pieces, and also looking, this data that I've been able to shows you building data, but we're gonna spend time talking with individual teachers as well, and looking into their individual rooms and their data and saying, having some very candid and hard conversations with people of where are the holes in your teaching, and if your neighbor next door is able to achieve 90% on this certain skill and you're only achieving 30%, what's the difference? It's not the kids in the room, there's a lot that comes into play as far as the instruction that's happening in the classroom. So taking a deep look at that as well. We are also working closely with looking at our grade level meetings and how our time is spent. This year we've changed the grade level meetings in my buildings, and I'm calling them instructional focus team meetings, and they happen once every 6-day cycle. And this year I've set a personal goal of attending 85% of those meetings. And within those meetings, I'm gonna be putting data in front of teachers constantly so that we can make sure that our instruction is data informed. And I wanna take a close look at how are they spending each minute of their day, and how are they grouping their students so that things can be readily available to them, and the expectations can be very high. Another piece that we're doing is that we put in place in my building a best practices document as a leadership team at the end of last year. We kind of took a look at, I next month will have been in the building 3 years, which is actually quite lengthy compared to the last 10, 12 years and the number of administrators that they've had in that building. So with that administrative turnover comes a lot of different expectations and a lot of different things that come down the pike. And some people will look at that and be like, she's just gonna forget about that next month, or by the time this rolls around again, I won't need to. So putting in place a tried and true black and white document that says, when I come in, I expect to see X, Y, Z happening for math. I expect to see X, Y, Z happening for ELA. And I think that really drives everyone in the right direction so that we're all pulling from the same rope in the right direction. And I think that some of the teachers really felt a little stressed from that at the beginning of this year, but I think it's what's necessary to get everyone's working hard. but it's just, are we all working hard in the same direction with the same goals in mind and the same expectations? So we've worked hard as a leadership team to put that document in place, and that's gonna be kind of an ongoing living document that we're gonna add to as we decide as a group that this is something that we're gonna push forward. And I think that that's been important. We talked about all that. Some of the hard conversations that I'm gonna be having is looking at people, like I said, individually with them for their scores, and then also looking at it collectively. And we're gonna I have a faculty meeting Thursday, and part of my intention on Thursday is to have, just like Mr. Mannix explained, that hard conversation of, we can decide to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps right now and make a difference right now and own this that we see in front of us, or we can wait and let the state come in, and we won't like how the state does it. And a couple of the strengths that I see in my building is that right now, I think collectively, they're the most cohesive that they've been in a long time, based on stories that I've heard from outside people, and based on what I've felt the change in the last, this is my 5th year with the district, in the last 4 years that I've been here. So I think that they are in a good place, they're collective and they're cohesive and they're ready to work together, and they want to succeed and they want our students to succeed. So I think those are some of the strengths that are coming in. And I think that as we continue to look at this data and come together and share with each other best practices, information that we find in outside sources. You know, one of the things that we do that's great is send people to a lot of professional development. We're very fortunate as a district here, but then we need to take that person's knowledge that they've learned and we need to share it. You know, one of the things I want to propose is that each month in my building I'd like to hold, you know, some sort of roundtable discussion where people can come forward and there's preset thoughts, whether it's on science or, you know, next month could be guided reading lessons, where we can come together and share and talk about what is it that I know that would be helpful to you, or what question do I have that some of you might be able to help me with. Because teaching is very much a silo, and we really need to try and break down those silos and allow everybody to work closer together. And I guess one last thing that I'll say before I hand it over is I myself am trying to do more of a coaching aspect in the classroom and not just an evaluator. Because as part of my role as the instructional leader, I've got to be able to get into the classrooms and coach people along and not just go in and sit down and try and evaluate them right away. And I actually, on Monday, last night, I had my first kind of coaching meeting, and it was phenomenal. But the discussion that we had for an hour over just bouncing ideas back and forth and, you know, sharing, when I gave a suggestion of something, being able to follow up with why I thought that that was important and why I thought that that would be helpful. And the feedback from the teacher was really, really receptive. So I'm excited to see that I feel like the building is kind of finally at that point where the walls are kind of coming down and people are going to able to open up and kind of have that dialogue and discussion.
Great.
So next we'll look at the building data for Cumberland Tech. So these are, if you look, we were at a fairly good increase from 17 to 18 all across the grade levels. 17 is the yellowish bar and the 18 is the green bar. So we were going up, but then we took a pretty big dive from 18 to 19. 5th grade did dive too much. They did very well on math, as you see coming out. But again, we were on a good swing, and I think just this last testing round, for some reason, whatever factors were involved, there was a multitude of things. Our scores really sunk pretty low. Here's our grade 5. Seems like we perform a little bit better overall in ELA, and our, oops, sorry. Yeah, okay, yep. So grade 3, you can see we're a little dipping down, trending down, and then grade 4, we were up and down, but then if you look at grade 5, they actually improved, which was really impressive, doing a computer-based testing with math, because when students were practicing for the math test at computer-based, they were worried about the drawing tool, so they had to use their touchpad to, you know, make symbols, and rather than using their mouse, rather than using their touchpad, and it didn't issue as we thought it was going to be. So that was a positive. And if you look right here, I'll go closer so that I can point. This is our cohort data. Again, like Sarah had explained, if you look diagonally, you can see how students did in grade 3, how they performed in grade 4 and 5. Overall, we were on a pretty good trajectory, but again, our last round of testing, we didn't fare that well. One thing I'm particularly concerned about is I saw a big dip from 3rd grade from 18 to 19 in ELA, and again over here in math, but something else to celebrate, our 4 to 5 math was really strong. Questions about that one?
What do you, I noticed in the other one, you had a big drop as well like that, a big number drop on math. Like that one's going from 30 to 6, right?
That's 7th, 8th grade.
Right, 7th and 8th grade.
Oh, right here, yeah.
Right. And I noticed in the other, I noticed a similar pattern in BES as well, on one of them. What do you know, wild guesses as to why the big, huge,
Can I just jump in on one thing for the 7th and 8th grade math is really it's pretty easy. As everybody here probably remembers, we've talked about it before, we do not test our accelerated kids. We do test our accelerated kids in 7th grade. We do not test our accelerated students on this exam in 8th grade. We pull our accelerated students out, 20-something kids. They take the Regents exam.
That's right.
They
That's
did
right.
phenomenal on the
That's
Regents
right.
exam. So you're taking our 20, potentially, probably 25 of our top 30 performers out of the pool. So you're gonna see a drop. We could make that number bigger, but we'd have to test our kids more. And the biggest hurdle in obtaining your high school diploma has historically been algebra. Those kids have crossed that hurdle. Mission accomplished. That test, algebra test, is a K-9 test. So everybody gets a piece of the win there on that test. Those accelerated students did really, really well. So for that particular group, I can tell you that's why you're always gonna see a dip in 8th grade math.
right, because they're not, so potentially with the expansion of the AP,
You're gonna see a lower number.
you're gonna, next year, you might see a lower number.
If it can get lower, you might see a lower number. Yeah. Because we're gonna have more kids
More
take the
kids.
algebra exam, because it prepares them, and I'm stealing people's thunder over here.
Oh,
so-
okay, go ahead,
All
never
right.
mind. No.
Is that something that the state takes into account when they evaluate a school?
Good question.
Your standings as far as our determination for a school within standing? I'm not 100% sure, but I think that the numbers are the numbers and they take that into for what it is.
Probably the way the state looks at it is they'll say, great job, high school, middle school, you gotta do better, right? We're just kinda short-sighted on that, right?
I'll give you the answer to that. We met with the state ed, and I'll give you the answer to that later.
Right.
So again, like the bar graph showed, we were, each cohort in a range, performed like we would have expected. However, that 3rd grade, ELA really took a dive, and then, overall 18 to 19, different scores. Next one. So how did we stack up with Clinton County? Again, Sarah showed how to kind of look at that graph. So basically, the darker, the better, right, for us. One thing to highlight is grade 5. All across, they've been making some improvements, so they perform better than 60% of the schools in our county in math. You know, 10s, that's not what we want to see. 8s and 9s, again, room for improvement.
You can see where we were back 14, 13, you don't see 13, you don't see 12, but you can see the improvement we have driven for a number of years there with the darker shaded boxes, as I described before.
So across ELA, we were, right here making gains. Little false
seeing an increase in the number of opt-outs too?
We have a slide for that, and we will address that, and we are actually improving on our number of opt-outs, which is good. So I have a couple things to add that I've put in place in response to our scores. So after a successful pilot of 2 intervention programs last year, we're fully adopting those for our interventionists. We're having increased focus on evidence-based instruction and at grade level meetings, just as in Sarah's building. We're looking closely at individual student, our local data, and we're making sure that kids are getting the proper support that they need. One thing I constantly keep talking to teachers about is the communication piece between the interventionists and the classroom teachers. They have to make sure they're targeting the same area, so we're not making our lower level students learn twice as much as our higher performing students. So they need to be on the same page and work strategically and work together. So we're having data meetings regularly so that they can share strategies. And my post observations with teachers will focus on, what is the data showing you with your individual students. So I think we've come a long way with collecting the data from what I can tell, the time that I've been here, we're collecting it. So now the next part is we know the numbers, so we have to dig a little bit deeper into what those DIBEL scores are telling us, really look at those scales and see how we can use that data to alter our instruction. And I think that's our next spot where we need to move. Sarah talked about our partnership with CVES. Another thing that will come out of that is that teachers will have that time together to digest the information and to network with each other. I think that I feel very blessed to work with such great teachers at Cumberland Head, and I think we really have some experts in our building. They really have a lot to share with our novice teachers, but it's the time factor. And so I think that this is going to provide us with some time for our more experienced teachers to share the information with our new teachers. And since I've been at Cumberland Head, I've always noticed there's a strong collaboration, it's a kind of a family feel, and it just kind of all pull together. So I think they're very cohesive, so I think they'll enjoy that time, that planning time together, and a lot will come from it. Again, for those of you that don't know, I was a former reading specialist in my previous position. So to me, everything starts in kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten, grade 1. That's where you really need to focus on those foundational skills, because by the time they get to 3rd grade, it's really, really hard. It takes twice as much effort and resources to remediate kids that go beyond grade 2, grade 3 in that sense. So what we're doing is I've added an extra layer of push-in support. So I have interventionists in addition to the students that they pull out and work with in a more specific, specialized program. They're pushing in and they're providing extra support 20 minutes a day, working with small groups of kids to kind of give them that extra boost. One thing I can't dismiss is our mental health of our students, and that they get to be increasingly challenging behavior-wise for us, but we do have added support. Mr. Maddox has, with approval, we have added an extra counselor at Cumberland Head, and that's making a pretty good impact. We've also had an extra clinician from BHSM to help support kids, help them regulate, and I think that's a lot of the issue is just that self-regulation piece. So in the last point I'll make, Sarah's touched upon some of the global things that we're doing, so I will leave that there. But another thing that we're doing is that we need to really be proactive in getting our students into school, because you can't achieve if you're home and you're not coming to school. So we are really looking at how we can improve attendance. So it's really a lot of working with the families, because kindergarten, 1st graders, they can't drive themselves to school, so it's a lot of outreach and working with families and calling and giving them supports and what they need. Our counselors are working really hard on reaching out. Teachers are doing the same. So while this looks dismal, there's a lot of positives that can come from it. Our teachers are ready to kind of dig in and work, and
they tend to track if you go upward diagonally to the right. So like a class generally tends to perform similarly as they go up. So like, say starting in 2015 on the math, if you go up diagonally to the right, so it goes like 4, 6, 2. And then they tend to do fairly well in English too. So do you have any graphs like this, but just the overall tests, not broken down into ELA and math?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Do you understand? I'm not sure I understand the question, Grant. Go ahead.
So do you have a graph that's structured like one of these, but not broken down into two graphs between ELA and math?
Oh, just for total?
Just an overall test.
Because that'll do like
So you could look at
a cohort,
as they go.
cohort together.
I don't think we have those included in it.
Because that's a lot to look at for a lot.
It is, yeah.
It averages out the ELA math together, right?
Yeah, you want one combined.
You know, Grant, I think I saw that before. I'll take a look. But I'm sure if we ask school meter, it's an interesting concept. They can make changes. They have, you know, great people that write their code, so.
This is an assumption I'm making, but these, so the year and the grade, the year is, it's always in the spring, right? So it's, so I'm trying to place my own students in there.
ELA's usually first, well, this year's gonna be in March, and then in April, it's a little, it's like earlier.
So year 17 is 16, 17, year 18 is 17, 18. So.
Yeah.
And you mentioned journeys. So does that meet the core curriculum requirements still?
So I think at the time it was adopted, it was one of those programs that came highly recommended.
Right, I remember
Right,
that.
So when companies are selling these programs to us, they're telling us they're aligned to the
Right.
core, Common Core and the state standards. But then what happens is a couple things. The standards start to shift a little bit, and then the curriculum is still a curriculum and it hasn't changed to meet the shift. And then the other thing you have to look at, and this is the work that we're going to be doing with CVES, is that you look at, if you were to map out your curriculum, right? Monday,
Mhm.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like for the whole month,
Right.
and then you have your standards, let's say A, B, C. If you put tally marks underneath A, B, C, you could get to F and G and then have no tally marks underneath that standard. So that's why you really have to look at the programs and dissect them before you buy into them to make sure they really are hitting all of
Okay.
the major core standards.
So when we did that, back in, I think it was 14, we had a group and we had 3 or 4 different curricular devices up there. And so think about, you know, this was and it should last 5 or 6 years. We knew that going in. But let's go 5 years ago, this was rated, and we looked at state rankings and state education departments broke down just like we're talking about right here. And Journeys was rated very high. Well, these other programs aren't going to be like, oh, we're low, too bad, we'll always be low to Journeys. They fill their gaps, but we can't fill our gaps because we bought that program
Sure.
in 05. So I'm sure what will happen is we'll buy a premier program in 1920, and then, but 4 years from now, there'll be other programs that are like, look, we're better than these because they've made improvements. And then we'll buy another program 4 or 5 years, and hopefully, you know, I don't think anybody wants to buy a low-tier program, right? But whatever you buy, they're always looking to improve and be better than their competition, and that's how they continue to make money.
The reason why I ask is because now we have to start looking at your resources. I mean, you're looking at how are you guys implementing what you have, or your process and your unified teacher perspective. But now on a budget, us here, we have to then at some point get some feedback from you, the experts, and say, well, we have to now change our whole book resource or whatever it is and buy the right tools for you to do your job.
And for me, I also feel that it's really important that any program that we purchase is only as good as the instructor that's going to be presenting it.
Yeah,
So
of course.
we have to look at the skill set of our staff and make sure that their skill set is high enough and they understand the standards approach and they understand when they look at something, there's no perfect program that's out there.
Right.
So there's inevitably going to be parts and pieces of whatever we go to that we're like, it's a little weak on that end, and that's just inevitable. So we have to make sure that the teachers that are gonna be implementing this program have that craft and that skill set of presenting it in its entirety with, you know, relevance and rigor and, you know, reliability, as well as that ability to look at the parts that are weak, and how are we going to supplement that?
So Mr. Scott had mentioned, I don't know if you already talked about this previously, Mr. Scott had mentioned we're going to be going down the road of, what did he call it, a curriculum review or a
Curriculum audit.
A curriculum audit, and it really is to do just what you were saying, like look at those materials, are they rigorous enough, or are they being misused? My gut feeling and from my observations, I guess it's not a gut feeling, from my professional opinion, is that I don't think they're rigorous enough. I think we'll find that there's holes, but again, we're gonna form a committee and look into that.
Thank you. Yeah, the audit, the curriculum audit will look at a lot of different components and will be very informative to us. But there's no doubt that Journeys was a good program, but it's time for another program. It just is. We knew that when we bought it. They should last 5 or 6 years, and it's been 5 or 6 years, so.
The middle school, hopefully I have something new to add to that. If not, just say ditto. So one of the pieces we're gonna look at is ELA. You might notice that, 7th grade had a significant, increase this year compared to 2018. However, what's, even more enlightening for me when looking at this and looking at our 8th graders is that the 8th grade
Yeah,
here
we gotta take a look.
is 29, here,
Yeah,
here,
wow.
has shown growth. And so that's really important in the conversation, is to make sure that not only that we're improving in just those silos of ELA 7, but that our cohorts are also showing growth. And so that's what I look for as the instructional leader, is that we're providing our students with appropriate standards-based instruction so that they're ready for the rigor of that state exam, which I think Sarah was talking about earlier during her presentation. So, ELA 7 again stands out because they did well. One of the things that I want to do is leverage the capacity for that teacher in 7th grade English, and find out what is she doing that maybe someone else isn't doing. And so one of the pieces that both Darcy and Sarah talked about is our work with CBES. And in the middle school specifically, we're going to be working at the content level. So my English teachers will be all together looking at the data. My math teachers will be looking at the data and collaborating and discussing what they do in their classrooms to help support their students. And so that's the direction we're going in tackling these data-driven discussions, right? In these content meetings with them. But I am fortunate enough to have the ability with their schedules to also have my teachers meet as interdisciplinary teams, right, at the grade level. And so I have Team Summit, my 8th grade team. I have Team Ascent, my 7th grade team, where we meet once a week and we can review student performance and look at the data as a whole. So it's a real team approach when it comes at the grade level, and then our content areas to evaluate instruction and make sure that it's standards-based and identify gaps, right? And so that's ELA. Oh, great. I have it now. Now it's not going to work, right? It's work for everybody else. We've already touched upon math, and looking at the data, you can also see that 7th grade math stands out again. And so 7th grade team is very strong, but I'd also like to point out that they do have an accelerated student population. They do take the test in 7th grade. So our accelerated students do take the test in 7th grade, but they do not in 8th grade. And so that is a contributing factor to the decrease in proficiency levels at the 8th grade level. And you can see traditionally Math 8 has been lower than the other grade levels. There's taken a dip. But again, you can also see from looking at the 7th grade that there was that in math 6, that green bar, they did grow. And so again, that's what I'm looking for, that growth. This is what I find very valuable when looking again, is seeing those trends. I can use a laser, but I'll probably go all over the place and blind people, so I won't do that. And I think Sarah and Darcy both did an excellent job, thorough job explaining this heat map. So you have, and Grant touched upon this, the cohorts, you have trends in cohorts, right? That you see over time. And so if I look at my 8th grade, that was a 10. I can see that the year prior was a 9. So it's not like a big dip, right? It's just a dip. I look at this 5 to 3, there's significant growth, which we saw in the earlier slides. And so that's what I find. I want to keep that growth happening, right? I want to go 5, 3, and next year, or this year, excuse me, in the spring, I'm not looking for a 2 or a 1, and you're like, well, that's hypocritical, Duffy. But I also have to understand that this year, my accelerated 8th grade class, my kids taking algebra, I have 50 kids taking algebra this year, right off the top. And so that is going to impact that number. We're not going to have a 3 possibly. But what we are doing is we're providing students with the opportunity to take a rigorous curriculum so they can be better prepared for high school next year, taking geometry or foundations of geometry even. And so that they have that under their belt and they go to high school with high school credit. And so overall, we didn't do that well, but I also have to point out that if you look vertically over, when you add these numbers up, is that 10, 3, 6 is 19, so we're doing okay. I mean, if the max is 30, we don't want to be at 30. And then the previous year, we were at a 21 for ELA. So our overall building performance, grades 6 through 8, is showing improvement with the new state exam.
And Duffy, I think when you add them up, I think we went through this exercise, when you add up this year, you just add up the 3 numbers, and that's a comparison within the county.
Right.
And you do that for every other year. This was the best year for the middle school. So you don't like seeing that 10 there in ELA, I got it. But when you look at every group, that's the lowest score from 13, 14 to 18, 19. So it is, there's always work to do. But actually from a performance base, in ELA, that's the best we've ever done against the county. Mike has a question.
We keep talking about the 8th grade, we're losing those advanced students. This is comparison throughout the county, so aren't other school districts also losing those students?
No, other schools I called around, their accelerated students, their algebra students take the 8th grade math exam. So that you can't, it's not apples to apples.
So they're not taking the Regents? We didn't want to do it because they're taking Regents and state
Right,
exam.
right, so they're taking the Regents exam and not the state test. Yeah.
Our students.
Our students are taking just the algebra Regents, they're not taking the state test.
We decided, and we brought it to the board with, and this is back when Amy Campbell was here, and I gotta say, I know it certainly has been 3 years. I don't know, Grant, I don't know, if you were probably tested twice. Do you remember? Did you remember taking the state test and the Regents exam? I'm sure you were accelerated.
Not sure.
Yeah, sure, remember.
It's a blur.
So that's how important this whole thing is. But we decided that we wanted to stop testing kids all the time, and that was a 3-day test, right? And the teachers were out of the room correcting the test. There was a lot of reasons why we wanted to stop doing that and focus on the right tests. And you've heard DIBELS, dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills for the little kids. We feel that's the right test. So we wanted to focus on the right test, which could have been the 8th grade state exam, but we believe the right test to focus on is algebra. And this year, to your credit, we're going to have not 22 kids take it, we're going to have 50 kids take it, because it's going to help them in the long run. It's going to help. You asked the question about how do they grade us overall. There is a new grading system under ESSA, which Matt will talk about, and that matters. That matters. How are our kids passing these exams and how are our kids taking more rigorous courses later on. So the more kids we have taking AP courses, the more points we get. We just added up points here. That's another point system that the feds have implemented. So we decided a long time ago, let's not have them take this nice one-day, hour-and-a-half test and this 3-day multi-hour test. Let's just have them take one test and have it be meaningful and rigorous.
And so, what I stated before, we have our grade level teams and our content teams that are going to be happening, and meeting with Terry and Amanda from CVES. One of the other things that we are doing is evaluating our intervention supports that we have put in place. We just now are in a pilot with Reading Plus, which the high school has adopted. We're piloting in the middle school to see if it's a good fit for our students who receive Tier 2 intervention when it comes to literacy. And so just being really more intentional with what we're doing in those intervention classes to help support our students, to help support their growth, so they can have AIS and improve in their content classes, their grade level classes. Another piece that we're working on is that curriculum audit, which I'm excited about as going into my second year at Beekmantown Middle School, is to be able to sit down and really look at what are the resources that my teachers are using in the classroom with our students and evaluating them using that standards-based framework, right? And so that we can really see that if we have something that's great, right, and very complete, are we implementing it with fidelity, or are there gaps in what we have in front of them, and then is there something else that we should be looking at? And so looking at it from those points. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the middle school that we're doing differently than at Cumberland Head and at Beekmantown Elementary. And we're really just focusing on the literacy, going back to what Mr. Mannix talked about in opening day, and getting and seeing how much our kids are reading to learn. And that's something that I observed last year with the use of guided notes and students not really reading to learn and extracting the information and seeing the main ideas and things in the text, but being told those. So I'm going to be working with the MST students that are coming in our building to evaluate how much time we are doing that deep reading in class. So those are just a few things that I have going on in my building. Any questions for me?
Do you see collectively any correlation between Star Web and the state testing, or any disparity?
Correlations, but yes, I do see students, it depends, this is one day in a student's
Right.
life, it's one snapshot. There is a correlation based on that progress monitoring that we have happening in our lit labs, in our math labs. We do see a correlation there. However, do we also see where there's a high achieving student in English doing well in STAR? You know, they're at over 10th grade level in STAR, and then they get a 1 on state test? Yes, but again, I'm going through the process with Mary Swanson this week of evaluating state test score versus STAR score, going through the history and making sure that we have students placed correctly, and that we're just not, say, oh, they got a 1, they go in this, but looking at them as a whole to make those determinations with regards to placement. If there aren't any questions, I really do think, Sarah, you did a really nice job. Darcy, thank you so much.
All right. So mine was a little bit different, as you guys saw, kind of the school meter data is not out for high school yet. It will come out in November. I'm excited to kind of see the comparison data for the Regents data that we have in. My reports are from the state report, so those are already in from level 1 to the state report. So these are the numbers that we will see on those reports as we break down, and I break the stuff down in June, right after the June Regents, for my own understanding of what's going on. So I'll go through each Regents that we have, just so you guys have an idea. It'll be a comparison from last year. And give you guys a little bit of an idea, this left-hand side here, so this is a little different. So what I want you to guys look at here is these are our kids that have IEP. So these are the kids that have a safety net. Some of these kids get a 55. That's a passing grade for those students to get graduation credit. So I just wanted you guys to kind of see the left-hand side. We had 98% of our kids on Algebra 1 are graduation ready at this point, taking that graduation requirement, 98% of them. So you think about that, 128, 130 kids passed the Algebra 1 exam. That is highly impressive this year, which is pretty cool. Here, this is mastery, so 15% of those kids had 85 or higher. And one of the big things that I really want to do going forward is moving that up. And you'll see why at the end of my slide presentation of the new ESA standards that Mr. Mannix talked about, is we need to move that 85 or higher, that mastery levels, level 3s, 4s, and 5s up to get more points. As you can see, here's our data from the raw data from Algebra with no safety net. So this is what you'll see as our comparison data coming out in November. So looking at Algebra 1, 94% of our kids passed the Algebra 1 exam with three level 3 or higher. So proficiency on the Regents exam is a level 3. If you look at it, a level 4s and 5s, 40% of our kids hit level 4s or 5s. That is highly impressive from last year where we had 18% of our kids were hitting 4s and 5s, and our overall percentage was 89%. So you can see that we went up 5 percentage points in proficiency and 22 points in that overall 4s and 5s. And that's deliberate. That was one of the things that when I came in last year, is I went with the departments, we broke down data. We sat there, we took together an analysis from last year's June Regents, and we looked at it. We broke it down by question. I told the teachers, okay, let's look at question number 4. We're low in that standard. What is it? And what is it? Is it a distractor? Is it one of the answers that our kids are messing up? Is it a vocabulary word? Really dig into that so that when you reteach that next time, you are deliberate in making sure that you understand, and the kids understand where we're going with that. So that, I think, is a huge asset to that. And that was one of the things I put on them last year, is I want this to go up. I want more 4s and 5s. That was a huge goal in that scenario. So you can see, Algebra 1, we did have 22 kids that were 8th graders, in that scenario. They were 100%. All 22 passed the Algebra 1 exam. So that's a tip of the middle school's cap. So that was a great thing for us. Living environment. And I'm showing you these are the graduation requirements, like Algebra 1, living environment. Okay, these are ones these students have to pass to graduate. Okay, so living environment, if you look at it, kids with IEPs with our safety net, 96% of those kids pass the exam. So you're talking, 129, 135 kids passed the exam last year as a living environment exam, as a ninth grade. That's pretty outstanding too. You look at 85 or higher, that was 55% last year. Look, taking those kids out from the 55 safety net, we were at 94% compared to 89 again. So we're up again 5 points there. If you look at our 4s and 5s, we were up 16 percentage points from the year before. Once again, talking to those teachers, making sure that we were deliberate with what we were doing, not only through our classrooms, but really looking at our ARS classes and tracking those students and having an assessment beginning, at pre-assessment, looking at that data, where are those kids? And I asked those teachers every 5 weeks to give an assessment, and we looked at that assessment data throughout the year to really pull and make sure those students were really working on weaknesses in our tier 1, tier 2 interventions. So you can see that trend is, you got to see a huge increase in both those numbers moving forward. Any questions so far, anything, or? Yeah.
Living environment, old timer here, that's our
Biology.
science. Oh, biology.
Biology, yes. So biology. And that was a shift a couple years ago that we moved from earth science to living environment in the 9th grade. We used to give earth science in 9th grade. We started doing living environment in 9th grade. Our kids have been more successful with that. A little easier test, I think, looking at the data, looking at the standards than it was that earth science exam. Earth science is a little tougher exam. I don't know if you remember taking it, but. So chemistry. So we looked at chemistry last year. Once again, this is the 11th grade test. So this is what we're looking at for advanced diplomas. Not every student will take chemistry for graduation. They got to pass. Once they pass the living environment, they can move on to graduation. They get their sciences. We can do a foundations of chemistry, which is not a Regents course, but we want more kids taking this course. So you can kind of see one of the things that you'll see here is we went up in proficiency, which is awesome. But one of the things I was pushing that teacher to do is look at the number of kids that we had to take that exam. 87 compared to 79. It's 8 more kids.
Wow.
And one of the big things I talk to those teachers about is we're not taking those kids out of it. We're having high expectations for those kids. Let's work with them. Let's try to get those kids. We're not taking that kid out of class after 5 weeks. Let's work with them. And I think that was something that really, was tough on the teachers at first. It's going to hurt our data a little bit. And it's getting over that perception. It's having that high expectation for those kids and say, okay, I understand maybe the percentage is gonna go down. I'm fine with that, because if you look at it, now we have 76 kids compared to 63 kids are now passing the advanced diploma. That's 13 more kids that now can go towards that advanced diploma as a graduation requirement than we had the year before. So I want more kids tested, I want more kids in those classrooms, even though you might see that some of this in the next couple years, it might go down a little bit, but I'm gonna have more kids in those classes. And that's the goal, is at the end of the day, I want more kids getting that score. So in this case for chemistry, we were at 80% last year, we're at 80% this, 88%, that's 8 percentage points higher. And then students that are level 4s and 5s went up 4 percentage points. You can see that in chemistry. Like once again, that is not a graduation requirement, but that is an advanced diploma. And like Mr. Mannix talked about, advanced diplomas, a Regents diploma gets us 1 point now for ESA. If we get an advanced diploma, that's 2 points. That doubles our pointage for how we're graded as a school. So that's important to me, is really working on getting more kids in this classroom taking the Regents so we can work towards an advanced diploma. We got a perfect case over here, right? You took chemistry Regents, did you get 100 last year? Was it almost 100? Yes. It was 100. So there's been 500s in chemistry, he's got one of them in the last couple of years. So that's highly impressive. He has 100% on chemistry Regents. Pretty good, I know about that. Yeah. So if you look at that, that's a cool thing, is that he's going to get that advanced diploma. He's had 3 years of science. He's taken that read. He's going to get a 2, and hopefully 2.5, because he's taking some AP classes too, which we'll get into a little bit here too as well. ELA. So ELA, we're a little bit stagnant. I mean, on this one, we were 85 last year, 85 this year. We went up with level 4s and 5s by 2 percentage points. I think ELA is one of those things that we really got to keep plugging away on. I think it's literacy across the content is important. So really looking at this data, I brought in the pilot last year of Reading Plus. Reading Plus is a program that is computer-based, and what it does is it tests the students at their level. So they take an inset assessment, what they call, it puts them at a grade level. And then what the program does is it basically gives them Common Core English questions based on their grade level. So it's not above them, it's not below them, and they're picking the stories that they're reading, so it's high engaging. So if the kids are interested in sports, they can pick sports articles, and they're Regents type questions on those type of passages. So we saw through the pilot, we saw students within just a 4-week pilot move up almost a half grade level. Right now, within a month of the first school year, we have kids that are already a half grade level ahead than they were. And we're putting this into our AIS classrooms, that's our tier 1, tier 2 supports, more deliberate. We want to make sure, and there's data there that we can use within each standard. So the kids struggle with central idea, they struggle with theme. They can look at that, and a teacher can say, okay, today I'm going to pull a small group of kids that struggle with theme, and we're going to work just on theme. The rest of the kids can go on Grade Plus. So it's really even making it more specialized within our AIS classrooms to make it, like I said, more deliberate. We understand where our kids are, and that's a goal. So I'm hoping we can get this. I'm not happy with that. 85 is not good enough for me in ALA. We got to get that up, and that's part of the process of, once again, being more deliberate with that.
But you got 85 with more kids taking the test, though.
Right, which is yeah, absolutely. So that's a good thing to look at. And more kids are, like you said, 8 more kids pass that exam. One of the things looking at ELA too is the goal there is I want to bring this number up higher. So what I'm going to do is this January, I have 37 kids that are right now in ELA, so between 80 and 84 on the June readings. We get those kids to 85s, now we're looking at level 4s and 5s with those students. So that number goes up even higher. So I want to hold a couple review sessions before the January and really get those kids to take that exam. Reason being, that helps the students' GPA. It helps them to an advanced diploma with honors because they have 85 or higher on that exam. So we want, those are the type of things. With honors gets us 2 points instead of 1. A Regents diploma gives us 1 point. So it's really strategically looking at all these little things that I look at on a daily basis to make sure our kids are getting the highest degree that we can and high in that standard. So, like I said, I'm not happy with that. We still got to improve. It's okay, but it's not where we need to be. Global, this is one of those transition exams, so we're working towards the transition. You'll see a little dip from 88 to 85 last year, and then our level 4s and 5s went down 4%. What's going on here is really we're making that transition into that new exam, those new Common Core questions. Every year we have this exam that's going closer to that new exam format. So what we're doing is in globals, we're really, we're going to PDs. I have those teachers going to scoring PDs. I have teachers going to that global, what those questions look like. and really looking at those standards, what's the difference? Enduring issues is a new type of thing that they do on that exam. So I have those teachers really working towards that. So, we're working towards that. You're gonna see it's a new exam. That's kind of what happens with new exams. We see a little bit of a dip. We're not too bad, but we're gonna continue to work with that group of teachers. It's a strong group of teachers. They're willing to work, which is really nice. They're engaging. We just gotta keep plugging away with that PD, and that's one of the things that we're really working on this year is really digging deep in the standards too. And one of the things I've asked our teachers to do is we have a target everything. So every board in our rooms have a daily target. That doesn't mean it's standard-based, but it's not that whole standard. We look at a whole standard, that's overwhelming for a child when they walk into a room. We want to break that standard down and scaffold that standard to make sure our kids understand. So when they leave that classroom, it's a question. We're not looking at central idea, pulling textual evidence to pull a central idea. We're not just looking at the central idea for that time. So I want you to be able to pull a central idea from this passage. I don't want you to analyze it, I just want you to be able to pull a central idea. That's a scaffolding step that we need to do, and that's a huge skill that we need to start doing. So that's a daily target that I'm asking our teachers to do in the classroom that's delivered. That student knows when they leave that classroom that day, this is what I need to know. It's not the whole standard, it's part of the standard, but it's not everything. So it's not overwhelming. So that's kind of the new thing I'm putting on teachers this year is really working towards that, and it's catching on a little bit. You probably see the target on the boards in the classroom, so that's something that's why that's there. Earth science, so this is one of the ones that we're really, we got to do a little bit of work with. You see that we kind of went down, overall 85% of our kids that had with IEPs, we passed. So students with IEPs weren't hitting at that level 3. We were looking at that. So we went down 11 percentage points. One of the things there, I don't know for excuses, but one of our teachers was out for 2 months. There was a tragic, thing that happened with that teacher. So 2 months of instruction, we had to get, we had to fill in with a substitute at the end of the year. So that was a tough thing that we were trying to get through on that exam. But once again, this is, we want to make sure more kids are getting these classrooms. So that's the goal that we got to really work on with earth science. Not a graduation requirement per se. So those kids that are living environment, we want them to go into earth science. So one of my goals is getting more of those living environment students, and that's going to help with, with our kids in middle school. So those kids that are taking living environment as 8th graders, now they're going right into earth science as 9th graders. So that should help those scores in our earth science because they've had the background in biology and going right into, so that'll be a good thing. I can't wait to kind of see that. Physics. So this is one that I've already met with the teacher. We've had countless conversations. I haven't come in this summer. This is just not where we need to be. And that was one of the things that we sat down this summer. We looked at the standards. We talked about what is going on here. So we have a plan together. We're looking at, making sure that these kids are being more successful in this classroom. One of the things you'll see here, though, and this is part, once again, you'll see the amount of kids taking the exam. So we had 18 more kids. That's on me from last year too, because I wouldn't take kids out of physics. I told you, let's fight through it. Let's get through this exam. I want more kids passing this exam. And once again, you can see that we had 7 more kids. Even though our percentage is at 9%, but 7 more kids are going to get a physics diploma. That's the 4 science. That's the hardest science you're going to get in high school. That's an advanced diploma. We're getting those 2 points out of those kids. And a lot of these kids are seniors. This test is right the day before graduation. So there's a lot going on for these kids. So there's a lot of factors that go into that exam. It's not cool. You'll be experiencing that this year. But
I took that one last.
oh, so he's ahead of the game, right? So that is a concern of mine. We've had conversations about it, but once again, I'm going to force more kids to stay in that class and take it the region's credit. It's just because it's a higher standard. We're going to push that higher standard. We want to make sure that those kids can handle it. Let's figure a way to get those through and move that percentage up. So that's a huge point of emphasis for me this year. Is really working with that teacher to make sure that we can get those scores back up. 90 was pretty good, but you think about it. 18 more kids. That's 50% more kids are taking that exam than the previous year. So that's important to me as advanced diplomas. Algebra 2, this is once again another advancement. These are kids that are going for that advanced diploma. Once again, you'll see the amount of kids taking this exam. 84 from 58. Once again, that's not letting those kids come out of that class. That's not letting that teacher say, oh, this kid might not pass that exam. No, he's staying in. Let's find a way to get that kid to pass those exams. And we were highly successful. We looked up, we were 74 last year, we looked at 81%. With how many more kids taking the exam? Once again, that's being deliberate, really looking at standards. Geometry, this is really, really impressive. We look at the geometry scores. And this was really, once again, what the other principals talked about, was really looking at standards. It was really looking at, this was a transition exam, and we sat down with that teacher and said, let's look at standards. We're gonna, you know, not to say, we're gonna teach similar to the test. We're gonna look at the test, we're gonna say, okay, where do we need to improve? Last year, our proficiency rate was 57%. This past year, we're up to 80%. That's a 23% increase in 1 year in our geometry test. And at the same point, you'll see, you know, 10% increase on our you know, level 4s and 5s. So that was a great piece for me to look at and really working on it. Yeah.
Can you clarify, what's the left column versus the right?
Yeah, so this is the kids, so these kids with IEP. So a student that has, you know, an IEP, a lot of them get a 55 safety net. So if they get a 55 on the exam, it's not a level 3, it's usually a level 2, they still pass that exam for graduation. So those kids, we have 92% of our kids. So there's some IEP kids in that number that probably get a level, definitely get a level 2. They don't fit a level 3 per se proficiency for state regulation. But it counts as graduation credit because they have that safety net of 55 instead of 65, which is usually level 3 on the exam. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why that's there, just to give you guys an idea of, you know, how well our special ed students are doing. You know, they are doing well. They're passing these exams. They're getting the credit for that for graduation. So 92% of those kids are taking a geometry exam, which is pretty awesome. That's a higher level math class.
Sure.
They, you know, and they're getting that score,
That's great.
which is cool to see.
Why such a drop on the amount of kids that took that test, though?
Which one?
Geometry.
Yeah, I don't know. That's one of the things we got to look at. Is, you know, 135 took it last year.
Yeah.
Compared to our 89. You know, class sizes have a little bit to do with that. We had 127 in our freshman class, a little bit smaller class size compared to 154. So there's kind of, you know, some numbers there, 30 students there, but not to the point where, you know. So that's one of the things that we got to look at too. U.S. history, once again, last year 92% from 89. Level 4s and 5s were up 1% there too. You know, 90 was kind of cool with our IEP students. 97% of those students passed the U.S. history. This is a graduation requirement, so students have to pass this exam. So that's why that 97% is really good. Because you get 11th graders, you know, you run out of time. Those kids have to pass the exam to graduate, and you know we only have 4 students right now that had to take it on. You know, so that's a good thing for us for graduation. You know, things. So you can kind of look at this, kind of sums it up for you. You know, increased overall 18 percentage points. We increased, you know, proficiency, and then we increased 25% points on those 4s and 5s, which is huge. Which is kind of cool to see. The last part I want you guys to look at, Mr. Mannix kind of touched on this is that formula. So this is what I spend. I wake up in the middle of the night and think about this formula. So if you look at it, so our level 2s get us 1 point. So those kids that are getting a level 2, so those kids that are 55s, those IEP students are getting 55, that gives us 1 point towards this formula. A kid that gets a level 3, you multiply that by 2. A kid that gets a 3 or 4 or 5, it's multiplied by 2.5 points. So what we need to do is, we've had conversations with my departments and say, okay, we need to move more of those kids from 3s to 4s, 4s to 5s. How are we going to do that? It's being deliberate. It's having them retake tests in January. So those kids that are 80, so math right now, we have 17 kids that have an 80 to 84 on the Algebra 1 exam. Those kids are going to retake the January exam, because if those kids get level 4s, now we're up to 2.5 points. That's pointage that we want to get to. Because if you look at it, here's what our scores were. So last year, if you look at math, and this is state reported, 115, we went up to 130 this year in math. So what they basically do, they take the highest level that you have in your 4 years. This is based on this senior class this year. And then the number below it, based on the 4-year senior class year before. So they take the highest level of that student. So let's take your highest level in math, right? What was your highest level in math? You think your Algebra 1? Is that your highest?
It's probably Algebra 2.
Algebra 2, what'd you get Algebra 2?
95.
95, so use that level 5. So he'll take a level 5, so he's going to get us 2.5 points just right now, because that was probably his highest at his math. So between his Algebra 1, his geometry, his Algebra 2, they take the highest level for that student. Same thing in science. Between living environment, earth science, chemistry, physics, they take the highest level that student obtained, and they put it into that formula. Once again, same thing in social studies, between global and U.S. history, they put it in there. So the goal here is what do we wanna do? We want more kids in that level 3s and 4s because it gets us more points in this formula. So you can kind of see on science, our graduating class this year is already up 2 points. ELA, we're down a little bit, that's what I'm working on. We're up 8 points in social studies, and math, we're up 15. So ELA, we have 37 kids right now, that now will take that exam in January. You look at this, now we're only looking at 6 of those kids passing that exam with level 4 or 5, out of 37. Now we're all above that, and then we want to get more of them. So it's really looking at these numbers, understanding the numbers, and it's, like I said, it keeps me up at night. One of those things that I look at constantly, and it has to be deliberate. It has to be, and we've seen great success doing this. Our region scores are moving forward. They're moving in the right direction. Now it's taking it even further. So, does anybody have any questions?
Matt, you missed one big showcase data point for you.
Which one?
Number of students taking college credit courses.
Yeah, so one of the cool things, yes. Right now, we're AP kind of changed the way that we do college board now. So now the students have to say they're going to take the AP exam by November 15th. So before it was, we did it in March. They had to make a decision. So right now, we have 116 kids that are signed up to take an AP exam. We have another 68 kids that are taking a CAP course through Clinton Community College, and we have 26 kids taking a course through Syracuse Forensics. So you look at that, that's 210 kids that are enrolled in college courses this year out of our 563 kids on campus. So that's what's important about here. And what that does is that gets us towards that number 2, those 2 points, because a Reader's Diploma and an AP level 3 on an AP exam gets us 2 points. So that's the goal there too, and acceleration is a big part of that. So that's a fun part that we've been working on a lot and being strategic with that. And we also have that, like I said, that Syracuse Forensic course is really awesome. All 26 kids are signed up for college credit. There's financial aid for those kids. It's been a kind of a cool process and it's a forensics course. So it's really awesome that these kids have these opportunities, and we're going to keep upping that number.
So over the years, the boards of education have supported us in offering more AP courses, more CAP courses, more college courses for kids. The number he just shared with you, that's unheard of. That's a huge number. So kudos to our kids for taking the course. Kudos to our teachers for becoming certified to teach those courses. Good job.
All right. So if anybody has questions, this is on the board portal. You guys haven't seen it yet. And also you can go to the New York website and you can, it's pretty neat, you filter it by whether it's Clinton County, New York State, IEP, not IEP, it's, pretty-
Skip to Mr. Decker.
yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Dan? Should we,
You want to skip to Mr. Decker and come back? I'm okay with that. Grant, you want to go first?
sure, good idea.
Hold the mute down. Hold the mute button down.
Yeah, I did. No. Yeah, it's got the green light. No. But I don't hear anything. It's okay. Actually, I'll continue without it. Who's your coach was? Okay, so I apologize for my untimely arrival, but for some circumstances, and I had my reports printed out originally, but due to said circumstances, they're not here. So bear with me as I read it off here. So starting off with the, yes, Cumberland Head. So the first Eagle Pride Assembly recognized the summer reading program participants, and all students who read over the summer were eligible to win prizes. Several readers were awarded with gift cards to local restaurants, soccer balls, basketballs, and a token for the book vending machine. Grand prize winners won a day at Champions Fun Zone along with a beach bag filled with a beach towel and goggles. Reading interventionists Carly, Crew, and Heather Stone did an awesome job leading that for the second year in a row. The PTO generously donated the prizes. Students at the EP Assembly were also top this month's top 20 concept They learn what it means to be above the line and below the line. Above the line thinkers are positive, while below the line thinkers are seeing things in a negative way. We all go below the line at times, but we will continue to focus on helping ourselves and others to get back above that line. Eagle Palooza was held on Sunday at Cumberland Head. Runners braved the wind and cold to complete a half-mile and a mile obstacle course. There was a pancake breakfast, bounce houses, face painting, and the Cumberland Head Fire Department was on site for water hose demonstrations. Again, our PTO and teacher volunteers created another awesome experience for the students. There have been several wonderful field trips. So students have visited Rolf's Apple Orchard, the Wild Center in Tupper Lake, and students will be going to the Flynn Center to watch a theatrical performance of Dogman, a play based on a popular children's play. Next, we have Beekmantown Elementary. So the new cafeteria opened yesterday, so that's cool. So the kids and staff all love the new space. It's a much more calm and quiet space for students to eat in than the previous location. The serving lines are extremely efficient, and the overall dining experience is improved. We've implemented several social emotional support programs. Zones of regulation is being used to help students have a language to discuss how they're feeling. We've also had our first positivity project assembly. We unveiled our new school song, which is Andy Grimmage, Don't Give Up on Me, and the students love the message in the song. The overall message of that they're working on this year is that other people matter. So tomorrow they have 71 students who completed the summer reading challenge going to Vermont's Flynn Theater for the introduction of Dogman, and that should be a fun time for all those students. On this Friday, they have grade levels who are webcasting with author Kate DiCamilio, and she's best known for her books because of Winn-Dixie and Tale of Despereaux. The PTO has planned their first Eagles Night Out next Friday on October 18th, and it should be a fun night for all the students. Beekmantown Middle School, Team Summit and Vertex went on team building field trips to Arbor Tech and Whiteface Adventure Center in September. There was high student participation for the theme days during homecoming week, and there were over 250 students that attended the homecoming dance. The principal's parent advisory committee had its first meeting on October 2nd, and some topics that were discussed were the top 20 curriculum advisory and ways to improve parent-teacher communication. News Channel 5 will be here on Friday for a showing of the North Country Honor Flight documentary. Veterans who went on the team ascent sponsored flight will be present as well after that. So last but not least, Beekmantown High School. So very busy start to the new year. So this last week we just had our homecoming and /spirit week. Our class officers and teacher advisors have been busy painting windows for friendly class competition. The juniors squeezed out the win. They set up and ran the annual pep rally where students and staff competed in the obstacle course. Did that. It's fun. It's like a bag race. So the band performed as students walked in. Athletics were acknowledged, and students were able to show off their school spirit. The girls soccer team kicked off the new athletics facility with a win on Thursday night, and the football team won against BHS for the first win on the new turf on Friday night under the lights. And our boys soccer team also recorded a win on Saturday, making it 3-0 on the weekend to open the new athletic facility. So really successful opening. The homecoming week concluded with the dance on Saturday night, and thank you to all the teachers and staff that made that week possible and safe. On September 26th, the SUNY Roadshow came to campus to speak with our juniors and seniors. SUNY College's representatives provided information and answered questions about the college search process and all that is available to undergrads at the State University of New York, SUNY. Students were highly engaged in this college in the presentation. On Saturday, September 31st, there was the National Honor Society induction ceremony where 25 students were inducted into National Honor Society in front of their parents, friends, staff, and teachers, and community members. On October 2nd, 44 students from our technology and agricultural courses attended a field trip to Clinton Community College's Manufacturing Day. The North Country Manufacturing Day event welcomes both area high school students and leading manufacturers. Students had the opportunity to speak with the most innovative employers to inspire the next generation of manufacturers. North Country Manufacturing Day addressed the common misconceptions about manufacturing by giving manufacturers an opportunity to showcase in a coordinated effort what manufacturing is and isn't. The action-packed industry came to life as students interacted with advanced machinery, 3D printers, CNC mills, hydraulics equipment, augmented reality, and many of which our students interact with daily here at Beekmantown through their coursework. Today, juniors and seniors attended both Castleton University and UVM. Students experienced campus tours, admissions presentations, and were able to see and step on a college campus. The goal is see not only what our local colleges have to offer, but also ones that are further away. The high school has also had representatives from the following colleges / universities on campus this past month to speak with our students and provide awareness to campus admission procedures. So we've had University of New Hampshire, SUNY Canton, Johnson Wales, College of St. Rose, Moine College, SUNY Potsdam, St. Lawrence University, Utica College, and St. Michael's College. And then lastly, 40 of our underclassmen will be participating in the PSAT on October 16th, and this will provide students with the opportunity to experience the exam and obtain valuable data moving into the real SAT exam in their junior and senior years.
Terrific. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so my report, Matt mentioned that he wakes up in the middle of the night thinking of the ESSA formula, and I don't do that because I know he does, but I do wake up in the middle of the night thinking of construction projects. One such item we've been working on quite diligently over the last couple of weeks is that wall we talked about. And I don't know if you guys saw the message we sent out to the whole community. It wasn't the first thing that we caught that was kind of off in the project, but it was right in front of a sidewalk, and it was, in a new building. We thought it was going to be a topic of discussion, so we thought we'd be very transparent out in front. The Bass Hatfield admitted that they weren't aware of some design specifications. This story gets quite interesting quite fast, and we were going to tear down that wall. And shortly thereafter, they realized that that actually they built the wall close to the specifications. So they weren't going to tear down the wall. So we said, as a district, well, they're having that discussion, we're going to X-ray the wall. So Jen and I, and Mr. Scott reached out and contracted with Atlantic Testing, and they do a lot of testing. Whenever you hear asbestos, we call Atlantic Testing. So any kind of testing, we call Atlantic Testing. So we said, hey, what do you have to test the wall? And they have basically a big X-ray, and they could take an X-ray of what's in the wall. Because we saw, when we also had Mr. Scott took a ton of pictures, so we knew how they were building the wall. And there is sufficient evidence now that actually probably they wouldn't admit to it that it was by accident, but it looks like they've used, there was 4 or 5 choices on how to build that wall to meet the engineering calculated design number that they needed. It's all quantified. And they used 2 of the most stringent areas out of 2 different designs. So they have, that wall is built, and it has, and I know it has, I saw them do it, it has cement poured into the cinder blocks, and also has rebar poured into the cinder blocks, or stuffed into the cinder blocks. So there's only one area where it might not meet the specifications. That's somewhere near the top where the rebar was supposed to be welded in, and they believe that it can actually have these big kind of clamps or clips, metal clips that will go on top. That's where we are today. Jen, do you think we missed anything there? No. So it looks like that wall is actually, well, we know it's exceptionally well built. It just isn't built to the specifications of one of the specifications. So we're leaning on Tetra Tech now to say, is this good enough? And we, no matter what, we know it's built well, but we need to make sure it's built exceptionally well, because that's what we're paying for. So the good news there is the wall hasn't been taken down, and it might not need to be, and we are comfortable because we are now confident of what's in that wall. We know what's in that wall because of the X-rays. So the X-rays actually help both our architect and engineering firm and Bass Hatfield to determine, how sturdy is that wall. They thanked us today, if I have that right. Just so you know, so how do these things happen? We catch a lot of things. We caught that the press box, believe it or not, was 4 inches, and that big long field was 4 inches off center. We said, take it down and do it again. We didn't say that to anybody because really most people wouldn't be able to detect that they had to move the 4 inches. The first retaining wall built over by the baseball field, I point to Mike, he likes baseball a lot, right? Was 3 inches from the one end to the other end. It's supposed to be completely level, and it was 3 inches off. So take it down, do it again. So we found a lot of different items over the course of this construction project. We being sometimes Mr. Scott, sometimes our construction management firm, sometimes it's even our contractors. A lot of different people. We always are discussing. Jen and I will walk around. Mr. Scott and I will walk around. We find things. This was a big thing. That's why we made a big announcement. We probably won't make a big announcement that the wall won't come down if it doesn't, but I'll check with you guys when the final determination is in. Interesting thing in one of these meetings, we found out that those new field lights, which are so impressive, and Grant got his first win under the lights, they're so impressive. They look like they probably cost a lot of money, which they do, but they don't use a lot of energy because those are LED lights. You know what it costs to run those for a night? $4. That's pretty impressive, right? $4. That's what we're spending. So when people complain about the lights being on, $4 if they want.
Can I add?
Yeah.
I know a guy who lives on Spellman, sitting in his living room, and didn't realize the lights were on until he turned around. So there's no residual glow or effect to the neighbors.
Yeah, it's really cool. When they first came on the first night, and I think Jen was on the field because a lot of the girls were around from a soccer game. Those folks right on the Spellman Road, right across the road, they didn't even know the lights were on.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's really nice. And that's by design. You'll see some more field signage. Hey, this is good news. I think you might have saw it in an email to us. Beekmantown, we do a lot of different things to try to help, I guess, maybe the environment. One of the ways you can help the environment is to have a farm to school initiative, and that actually there's a lot of eat local campaigns, and you understand what I'm talking about. We're out of 702 school districts in the state. We're ranked number 49 in farm to school, so that's pretty good recognition for us. Something I'll dump into the board portal, and just so everybody knows, and we're going to wish Mark Sand good luck in his election. We do have the school law, so what happens if Mark, no, not what happens if Mark wins. When Mark wins, we'll know what will happen, just in that way, if anybody's asked, you'll have the law right in front of you. And the last thing I have, well, two other things. We've talked a lot in the data presentation about utilizing CVES. That's because we subscribe to a school improvement service. So that's a school improvement service that will be helping us. And lastly, our friend Mr. Kelly, who was here tonight, talked about the benefits of granting pilots and how it can really help the school district. What he doesn't talk about is the tax cap formula. And that's the point that I try to make all the time. It is great to have development in your area. It is great to have new businesses in. But right now, even when that pilot matures and becomes fully taxable, that hurts us. That will always hurt us in our tax cap formula. So we just can't forget that. There's no catch-up mechanism for that. So I don't know that he ever talks about that. So that's why we're very adamant on pilots, and we try to protect. Really, what we're trying to protect is our homeowners, because you're going to pay more if they're paying less. The business pays less, you're going to pay more, and there's no way for you to get that catch up when that business starts paying more. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Jen, of course.
We'll let those get passed around, but as was mentioned, we did open up our cafeteria yesterday in the elementary school, because this is going to be, we're discussing cafeteria stuff, and it went really well. I guess Ms. Roxy said yesterday morning they had a great turnout for breakfast, and I believe lunch was the same thing, high numbers. So all the kids want to get in there and check out that new cafeteria. It's great, and everything is running smoothly as of right now. So that's good. Everything went very smooth.
They bring food over from the main cafeteria? Is that?
Yeah, well, everything's, the service line is right there, so the food comes down, they have the warmers, and then they have they have a hot line and a cold line. So it's working out very, very well. There's still a few little punch list items that we have to work out in there, but nothing major, so all is good. And so what I just passed out was we've been having the discussion, paper versus styrofoam versus hard trays. I think those are the kind of the three options we've been looking at. So Mr. Mannix and I and Roxy had a meeting last week. And went over some numbers, went over some ideas, options. So as you see, the first one is a paper option. And I limited it to 9-inch plates, trays, and straws. Those are the major things that we use. There's other items that are styrofoam too, but I wasn't gonna list 25 different items. I focused on the big ones. And just those 3 items, if we were to switch from one to the other, from styrofoam to paper, the approximate increase per year would be about $32,000 with those 3 items. If you look at the hard tray option, we obviously have to purchase the hard trays, the plastic trays, so there's that cost. And then we'd have to look at hiring employees. And we do part-time employees, which means we need 2 shifts. We need the morning shift and the afternoon shift. If we keep it part-time, that means we don't have the benefits that we have to pay out, because that would increase this number drastically. So it'd be 3.5 hours in the morning, 3.5 hours in the afternoon. We're looking about $18,600 for employees. Then you're also looking at chemicals, repairs, parts for the dishwasher. All that has to be kept up, and that's just an approximation, $3,000. We haven't run a dishwasher over there in quite some time, so I am not sure of the exact number, but that's a ballpark.
But we do have the equipment.
We have the equipment, yes. And from what Roxy is telling me too, the booster in that dishwasher is not working properly right now, because you have to have a booster, it has to get up to temp, the water has to get up to a temp in order for it to be legal.
Mr. Mays, I remember something in the EPC involving the dishwashers.
I think that was at Cumberland Head. They still,
Cumberland
they
Head.
use trays at Cumberland
Yeah,
Head. They have more staff and they have dishwashers.
yeah, so over at Cumberland Head, they already use the hard trays, so they do have a dishwasher.
I think that's where it was, Mike.
So the approximate cost for switching over to hard trays is about $29,000. But we also looked at the water usage, and I believe Roxy was the one who told us the dishwasher uses approximately 120 gallons per day. So approximate per year is 21,600 gallons per year of water. We don't know what that would look like on our, we have a well system here. Cumberland Head, we pay for the water, here it's the well system. I have no idea what that will do to our well. Again, we haven't had, I don't know the last time we used a dishwasher over here at the main building. So these were some of the topics we talked about in our meeting. Looking for part-time people is not an easy task. We've been looking for a part-time cashier. We're having trouble finding that. If we're looking for 2 more part-time people, are we gonna be able to find them, number 1? Number 2, are we gonna be able to keep them? Turnover is extremely high in the cafeteria right now with our part-time people. And what that means is if we have a dishwasher that doesn't come in that day, that means we've got to pull somebody from the line, or the cooks, or somebody's got to wash these dishes. So that means it's going to hurt something else in the cafeteria. If somebody decides they quit, we've got weeks down trying to find somebody. That means we've got to pull somebody, and that hurts somewhere else. So something else in the cafeteria. We also have to look at replacement of hard trays. I don't know what we'd be looking at for replacement. I mean, it happens, they get broken, they get thrown away, they disappear, especially in the high school. That seems to be one of the, elementary is not so bad, but high school is. So I did not factor in a replacement cost for hard trays, but we have to keep that in the back of our minds. What we'd like to do, we are gonna do a day where we try the paper trays and see how they hold up. And we'd like the input from faculty, staff, and students, and maybe, Grant, you can help me with the student side of it, to see their opinion of them. See if they like them, or, you know, food's falling through, or if they're really sturdy and they love them, or, because we have no idea. So we really would like to test them to see how they hold up. So we talked about a day.
Chicken Alfredo.
Chicken Alfredo, that's what we're
Chicken
gonna do.
Alfredo.
I think it's in October, we're gonna try a day.
It's
We're
a
gonna order
favorite.
the paper trays and see how they hold up, to give it a try. And then with the thought of, you know, if we do decide to do one of these options, we have to look at a funding source for the additional costs of either one of these options. And, I mean, that is going to be coming from the general fund. We would have to subsidize the cafeteria. They are not self-sufficient now, that would mean they were getting closer. They've actually been doing pretty well. If we implement this, it just makes them get further away of being self-sufficient, so. All things we discussed. I'm looking for thoughts, ideas. We also also talked about doing the straws right away, getting rid of all of our plastic straws right away, switching over to paper, because that's something we could do easily, affordably, and, you know, start maybe with baby steps, kind of things.
How much is, just out of curiosity, how much is a hard tray? Like just one?
We priced them out, Amazon is the cheapest, that total price is for 1,000 trays, so, yeah. Yeah. Amazon was cheaper than the local vendors, so we'd order them through Amazon.
Oh, seven. All right. Any questions for anybody else? No? I'll actually ask you to kind of continue, because I wasn't at the audit committee meeting because I was in Albany that day. And I know that, Boris was there, and he talked about the unmodified opinion.
Audit went very well. Mike came in and presented at the audit committee. He'll be coming to the next meeting.
Yeah.
He's scheduled to come to the next meeting. It was a clean audit. The only thing that was in it was we're over the 4% for our fund balance. That was really.
Yeah, and he'll be here
And
to
he'll be here in
November.
Yeah, he's all booked. Ready to
go
go.
for the next one. All right.
And I do have the bound copies, so I can send those out to you guys before, I have them now, I'll send them out.
Mike has a question.
So Jen's done all this nice work for us. How do we engage in a discussion with what she presented? Does that sit for now? Do we start?
Well, that's a good question. I guess, so the bottom line is, you know, it was brought to our attention that, you know, there are other options. What is the appetite of the board, and do we want to invest in a healthier environment approach? Is the cost too much?
Do we wanna wait till after
The test?
trial day? See if these things are junky and we don't wanna go that way?
So right now, we have increased costs,
Yep.
so,
Well, I don't know if you said it, we buy in bulk, so there's a big, did you mention that?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so we buy in bulk, so we have all the trays through March, I believe, or at least maybe even through the year.
I think it's through at least March.
Yeah.
Because we buy in bulk through the BOCES bid every
Yeah.
year.
makes sense.
So, yeah, because it's a lot cheaper. So we've already purchased everything. It's gonna get us through at least March.
Yeah, so time
Styrofoam.
Yes,
the styrofoam,
correct.
well, we use hard trays in some places, styrofoam's paper plates. We have a plethora of options that we do use, but there's no urgency, so we could engage, it doesn't have to be tonight. It's not, I don't think we'll just slam the brakes on.
But I think Roxy was gonna try and do the paper trays one day in October.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely try.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll report back on that, and
Thanks for doing your research on that, because, I mean, a few of us were interested and asked for that info, so. appreciate it.
Didn't someone mention something about biodegradable trays?
Yeah, it was in one of my emails, I
Does
don't
it-
know if it's someone.
yeah, that's what we looked, so we looked at a lot of different trays, and we talked to, like, the trays were really kind of expensive, and then what we're trying to find is something that we think is cost effective and hopefully sturdy.
Okay.
And then we want to see, do the kids like it, you know, does their food touch, what are the issues here, I don't know.
All right, okay, thanks. So, yeah, so after this, we'll.
Yeah, we'll get back to them.
Okay.
Is that all right, Mike?
All right, we already went over the audit committee meeting, done. Consent agenda. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends the Board of Education approve the following minutes. Motion. All right. Mike Hagedorn, any discussions, questions? All in favor? Pass. Okay. CPSC, resolve the superintendent of schools recommends the Board of Education to approve the CPSC, CSC, and 504 recommendations dated 10/8/19. Motion?
A motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Pass. Personnel, so resolve that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on the consent agenda: resignations, appointments, per diem nurse employment agreement, and fundament agreement be and are hereby approved. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question, I'm sorry, what's the fireman agreement? I saw the document, but
Yep.
it's important to know what that is.
Yeah, so it's the fireman was a name of an individual. And it's a legal agreement between the teachers, the union, and the district. When somebody is uncertified, and usually they're working towards certification or really, really close to certification. But so everybody knows that tenure hasn't started yet, because your tenure doesn't start until you become certified. So they're an employee. When they become certified, you'll see their name back on the agenda, and then they'll start their certified time. So they can't claim later on that it was certified time.
Excellent. Good question. All in favor? And passes. All right. Page 8, number 13, miscellaneous. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on this consent agenda: use of facilities, fingerprints, and organizational chart be and are hereby approved. Motion, please.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion? No? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, this is a roll call vote, it says here.
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay, that was a mistake, all right. That passes. You're testing me, Joanne. I'm messing with it. Financial. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on this consent agenda: financial reports, grants, audit report, and installment purchases agreement be and hereby approved. Motion, please?
Motion.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Crystal beat you to that. Okay, any questions or discussion? Roll call vote.
Douglas Beebe,
Yes.
Kathy Buckley, Michael Hagedorn,
Yes.
Ed Marin,
Yes.
Christopher Misha,
Yes.
Crystal Palmer,
Yes.
Nicole Pupor,
Yes.
Mark Sand,
Yes.
Colleen Stone.
Yes.
All right, passes. Okay. Additional items to discuss. Regional Rural Issues Forum. At 6 PM at CVS. So, this is for us. Any of the board members want to attend, there's going to be a Regional Rural Issues Forum on November 6th at 6 PM at CVS. If anybody's interested in going, let Joanne know, or, I don't even know if they can just show up. Do they have to
Sign up.
sign up? Okay.
If you thought health insurance was gloom and doom, you go to that.
All right. And next one is the next School Board Association's meeting on November 14th at 6 PM. It'll be at the West Side Ballroom. So when do we have to let you know about that, Joanne?
By the end of the month.
End of month. All right. And next, public comment. I don't see anybody here for public comment. So we'll continue on with executive session. We have an executive session.
Yes, we do have an executive session. Discuss employment history of a particular person or persons, and for the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, or the proposed acquisition, sale, or exchange of securities, but only when publicly would this affect the value of these things.
All right.
It should be fast, and there's no action that's going to be
Afterwards.
taken.
All right. And we need to appoint a clerk pro tem. I'll volunteer for that if you want to.
Motion for you.
Okay.
Second.
All right. And so resolve that the board enter into executive session to discuss those that Dan just mentioned. I need a motion.
I'll move.
Who's that?
I'll move.
Chris? Second? Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. 9:19.